Chapter 491. Before 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Song Ji-win and the others came back. Maybe it was because they had to catch the plane, but they seemed to be a little unsatisfied. What's wrong? Is Mount Qingcheng so fun? Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "It makes me want to go and play. The mountain is just that, but the Taoist heritage there is much stronger than the Qingyang Temple. Even the archway is bigger than the Qingyang Temple." Song Ji-win said, "I heard that it's from the Quanjun sect. I don't know if Yin Jiping has been here. You only pay attention to Yin Jiping in the Quanjun sect?" Poplar Fruit asked strangely, "And this guy's notorious. Hey, he is the most enviable man in the Return of the Condor Heroes." Song Ji-win said with a sneer, "The first night of the fairy ant Xiaolong knew was given to him. If he died under the skirt of a pomegranate, he would be a romantic ghost. Can you show some promise?" Chen Amlin gave him a slap from behind and pushed him forward, staggering a few steps. "The scenery of Mount Qingcheng is really good," Song Ji-win finally said seriously. "Lao, you should go and have a look when you have time. That is the real Taoist holy land, surrounded by mountains and rivers, surrounded by clouds and mist. Unfortunately, we only have half a day to play. Unlan can go again tomorrow. By the way, since it is a Taoist place, did you meet any masters?" Poplar Fruit asked curiously. "No masters, but wearing a Taoist robe and blindly gesturing one after another." Song Ji-win curled his lips and said, "I don't think that is a place for masters. With so many tourists, the real masters don't like to stand there and be seen as national treasures." Chen Amlin agreed with Song Ji-win's point of view. She nodded and said, "Yes, I won't go again. There's not even a real Taoist on the whole mountain, unlike Wudong, where there are a few masters living in seclusion." With that said, Poplar Fruit's originally restless heart gradually died down. Since Song Ji-win and the others had seen it, he would take Kiki to see the pandas tomorrow. "Unlan, are you going back to the hotel to rest? I have to send Mosquito to the airport to take a plane later. Do you want us to send you back first?" Poplar Fruit asked when he saw Song Ji-win was packing his luggage. "No need. Her luggage is in the car's car." Song Ji-win didn't even raise his head. "I'll go with Song Ji-win tonight." Chen Amla nodded and said, "Ah." Yangwa asked in surprise, "You're going back to Yangchang with Mosquito?" "She's his A's names is SSSA's SSS SSSSSSSSSSSS. I also want to take a plane." Chun Amlin explained, "I've been out for half a month. I have to go home to take a look, otherwise my mom will be worried." "Worried about what?" "Worried that you'll break someone else's." Song Ji-win chuckled and said, "Hey, Song Ji-win, why are you asking for a beating?" Chun Amlin ran over and kicked Song Ji-win, who was packing his luggage, onto the bed. Poplar Fruit looked down and saw that Kiki was looking at Chun Amlin's actions with wide eyes. Her clear eyes revealed a trace of excitement. Poplar Fruit was alarmed. He didn't want his daughter to turn from a good girl to a violent person, so he quickly reached out to cover Kiki's eyes. Kiki struggled for a moment, grabbed her father's wrist, and said in a childish voice, "Papa, Papa, Red Wolf hit Gray Wolf." Poplar Fruit was stunned and almost laughed out loud. Wasn't that right? Chun Amlin, who was reprimanding Song Ji-win with his hands on his waist, didn't look like Red Wolf with a frying pan. After eating something in the hotel, Poplar Fruit and the others drove to the airport. On the way, Song Ji-win and Chun Amlin's words continued to be heard. "Hee, in 2 hours, you won't be able to hit me anymore." Song Ji-win touched his chin with stubble and said with an evil smile, "Don't be so proud." Chun Amlin glared at him and said, "Thousands of rivers and mountains. Oh, oh, oh." Song Ji-win swayed his waist and moved around in the back seat. Chun Amlin wrinkled his nose and sneered, "Don't worry, I'll come to Yangqing often in the future. When the time comes, you won't be able to escape even if you want to." "No way." "Great Aunt, why didn't you stay in Jean City? Why did you come all the way here?" Song Ji-win said with a pale face, "I'll deal with you." Chun Amlin twisted his wrist proudly, and his joints made cracking sounds. Poplar Fruit looked at the two of them strangely through the rearview mirror but didn't say anything. After arriving at the airport, Song Jiwon hadn't boarded yet, so Chun Anlin went to line up to buy the ticket. Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwon waited outside. He pulled Song Jiwon and asked, "Hey, Mosquito, don't tell me you're interested in lawn." "Damn, why would you think that?" Song Jiwon reached out to check the temperature of Poplar Fruit's forehead. "You don't have a fever. You don't have a fever, but why do I feel like you're acting a little strange today?" Poplar Fruit said with a frown. "You're thinking too much." Song Jiwon patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder and chuckled. "I can fall in love with anyone, but I can't fall in love with little Chili." After a lot of reflection today, Poplar Fruit began to have a little confidence in his EQ. He shook his head and said, "No, I remember you telling me that you like girls who are domineering and unreasonable. Doesn't Enlon always beat you up meet this condition? Why are you like my mother, obedient and like to take things out of context?" Song Jiwon looked at Poplar Fruit speechlessly and said, "What did I tell you at the time? I said that the girl I like is domineering and unreasonable, and she's also cute and lovable. Did you see that? 2 conditions. Lovable? That's not very likely." Poplar Fruit glanced at Chun Anlin, who was standing on his tiptoes in the crowd and sticking his head out to look. He shook his head and said, "But she's a cute little bird. She's quite small." Song Jiwon waved his hand in front of Poplar Fruit's eyes to get his attention. He smiled and said, "First of all, domineering and unreasonable. I don't mean a woman who hits people for no reason. Domineering and unreasonable. The kind of white-collar goddess who can command the wind and clouds in the business world, who is very charming at first glance. And she's cute and lovable." Song Jiwon chuckled and said, "At home, of course, she has to listen to her husband. If I say 1, she can't say 2. Then, she has to be obedient and sensible and knows how to cook." Poplar Fruit rolled his eyes and said, "How can there be such a perfect woman?" Song Jiwon continued, "Isn't there a saying that goes, if you're good in the hall, you're good in the kitchen? If you're good in the hall, you have to be good-looking. In terms of appearance, Enlon is pretty good, right?" Poplar Fruit was confused. "Didn't you used to watch the action educational films in Muhong country and like this kind of baby-faced beauty?" Chapter 492. Poplar Fruit secretly covered Kiki's ears with his hand because the conversation was getting heated. Although Chi-Chi usually didn't interrupt, based on her father's understanding of her daughter, Yangwen knew that Chi-Chi was actually listening most of the time and could even understand. Watching a movie is watching a movie, but in reality, it's another thing. Song Jiwon said seriously, "This is my standard for finding a girlfriend, not a standard for finding a wife. Is there a difference?" Poplar Fruit laughed. "There's a big difference." Song Jiwon nodded seriously. He looked carefully and saw that Chun Anlin was still in line. He sighed and continued, "When looking for a wife, you can't find one that's too short." Chun Anlin was indeed not tall. She probably wasn't even 1.58 meters tall with shoes. Moreover, she didn't like wearing high heels, so she looked like a junior high school student. Fortunately, she wasn't wearing a school uniform. Otherwise, she might have been dragged away by the police. "Why?" Poplar Fruit asked doubtfully. "Isn't it cuter if she's shorter?" In fact, with Song Jiwon's height, 1.73 meters, he and Chun Anlin could be combined to form the cutest height difference. Poplar Fruit didn't think there was a problem. He was 1.87 to 1.88 meters tall, and Fong Bei was only about 1.8 meters tall. The difference between the two of them was more than 20 centimeters. "Of course not," Song Jiwon said righteously. "The height of the parents determines the height of the child. I don't want to marry a short woman and then average out the excellent genes of the Song family." Poplar Fruit was speechless. He said speechlessly, "Fine, if you have the guts, say that in front of her." Song Jiwon immediately became shorter. He smiled apologetically and said, "Lao Gua, I called you brother. Don't tell anyone. If Little Pepper finds out, I'll die without a complete corpse." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "You don't like her, so why do you care so much about her feelings?" Song Jiwon sorrowfully said, "Old Gua, you don't know how many punches I took when you threw me to her today. Fortunately, It was only for one day. Otherwise, my life would really be a piece of darkness. So, I have to add another one to my standards. Song Jiwin stood up and said to Poplar Fruit, "You can't find a wife who knows martial arts." TSK, it's scary just thinking about it. What's scary? Chen Anlin had just walked over and only heard the last sentence. Song Jiwin was so scared that he jumped up. Because his legs were crossed, he almost fell and rolled to the ground. He looked carefully at Chen Anlin's expression. He didn't look angry, so he was relieved. He laughed dryly and said, "I'm talking about the big rat that suddenly came out of the grass on the hillside when we were climbing the mountain today. You were so scared of the big rat. How can you say it's scary now?" Chen Anlin curled his lips in disdain and commented, "You're really not manly." Song Jiwin also muttered in his heart, "I don't know who was scared out of his wits when he saw a dog." However, he didn't dare to say this out loud. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to leave today. Yangwo looked at them suspiciously and thought, "Could it be that I'm wrong?" Song Jiwin still took the 7 o'clock flight home. It wasn't like they were going to part forever. Poplar Fruit and the others pushed him to the ticket gate with a smile. Chen Anlin was going to be an hour later. Poplar Fruit planned to leave after sending her off. Kiki sat on her father's lap and looked left and right. In the end, she was so bored that she was sleepy. Poplar Fruit wrapped her with a layer of clothes and then snuggled in his arms to sleep. Chen Anlin and Poplar Fruit also chatted casually. Without Song Jiwin's jokes, Poplar Fruit and her had a lot less to talk about. He even felt that there was nothing else to talk about other than Tai Chi. Oh, right. Poplar Fruit's eyes lit up. He asked with a smile, "What do you think of my brother?" "What do you mean?" Chen Anlin didn't like to beat around the bush. She asked directly, "What do you think of him? Do you want to go further with him?" Poplar Fruit said with a smile, Brother Poplar Fruit, why are you thinking of this?" Chen Anlin wrinkled her nose and cried out unhappily. Poplar Fruit quickly raised his hands and said innocently, "I think you guys seem to have a lot of fun today. I thought you guys had some sparks." Song Jiwin. Chen Anlin curled her lips and said, "Brother Poplar Fruit, don't think so much. While I look for a boyfriend, I definitely won't look for someone like him." TSK. The two's reactions were exactly the same. Poplar Fruit smiled and asked, "What's his type?" "Arrogant, long-winded, annoying, and cowardly. He can't even beat me." Chen Anlin casually pointed out many of his shortcomings. "Actually, he's not bad." Poplar Fruit defended his brother. "He's not a coward. There aren't many men in the world who can beat you." Indeed, Chen Anlin's skills could be considered a genius in today's world. Poplar Fruit felt that even the big brother of the Xingyi Martial Arts School couldn't beat Chen Anlin. "That won't do," Chen Anlin said seriously. "My man must be a hero who's more powerful than me." Chen Anlin suddenly looked at Poplar Fruit strangely. Poplar Fruit was almost shocked. He quickly waved his hand and said, "Why are you looking at me? It's impossible for the two of us. I already have a girlfriend." It seems that Fong Bei hasn't officially agreed yet. Poplar Fruit kept saying this sentence. Chen Anlin said with regret, "I know, and I already have child. Sigh, it's rare to meet someone as powerful as you. You're also so handsome. How can you already have a flower?" "So Mosquito has no chance?" Poplar Fruit didn't give up and asked, "Why do you always match me with him?" Chen Anlin asked strangely, "Do we look like a couple?" Poplar Fruit shook his head and said, "Nope. But didn't you say that you'll be coming to Yangqing often? I thought that you and Mosquito had some secret." Chen Anlin helplessly smiled and cried, "Poplar Fruit, I went to Yangqing to find you. It has nothing to do with him. Why are you looking for me?" Poplar Fruit said in fear, "To train." Chen Anlin said seriously, "I feel that your understanding of Taiji Fist is deeper than anyone I've met. If I can learn from you often, I'll definitely improve faster than if I practice at home." "So that's the case." Poplar Fruit looked at the girl who was obsessed with Taiji Fist in shame. Actually, Poplar Fruit was also obsessed with martial arts, but he wasn't as passionate as Chen Anlin. "It's fine. Come and find me when you're in Yangqing." Yangwa smiled and said, "We can be considered friends. Come to Yangcheng. I guarantee that you'll come happily and leave happily." So it turns out that he was overthinking it. Poplar Fruit, who didn't have enough EQ, sighed secretly. Chapter 493. Chun Anlin also left. Back at the hotel, Poplar Fruit suddenly realized that he was alone. A man, a dog, and a sleeping Kiki. However, Poplar Fruit's life goal was to translate and learn, so he was quite used to this kind of loneliness. It was a quiet night until the sun rose. Poplar Fruit didn't have to rush to the next scenic spot. He gave Kiki a bath and slowly dried her hair. He didn't leave until 10 o'clock. The place they were going to today was called the Shu Du Giant Panda Base. Originally, they were going to the Wulong Reserve. However, considering that the Wulong Reserve was a bit far, and they had to travel a long way to see the pandas, Poplar Fruit chose the panda base recommended by the backpackers. The panda base was about 10 kilometers outside of the city. They arrived in less than half an hour by car. When they arrived at the base, Poplar Fruit was pleasantly surprised to find that instead of a cold base, it was more like a beautiful mountain villa where people and nature coexisted in harmony. It was said that the entire base was man-made, but Poplar Fruit couldn't see any signs of it being man-made. Sitting on the electric scooter, they could see that there were hills, lakes, streams, dense vegetation, and even the bamboo forest that the pandas loved. Looking at the trees that almost swallowed up the narrow cement road, Yanghua had a feeling that she was in the wilderness where there were no traces of people. Of course, in some places that were specially designated as tourist attractions, it was a different kind of scenery. On the unusually smooth lawn, there were a few lifelike bush elephants. They either raised their heads and howled, or shook their heads and wagged their tails. This was the pride of the clever gardeners. There was also a lush and verdant bamboo forest. Tall and thin bamboos bent at both ends of the road, forming a dark green arch between each other. The winding road seemed to emit a mottled halo, but there was no end in sight. However, no matter how artistic the scenery was, it couldn't compare to the main characters here, the pandas. In order to see the protagonists, Poplar Fruit and the others passed by Swan Lake in an electric scooter. They didn't stop but took a long detour to the area where the pandas were active. Along the way, Kiki was very excited. She hugged her father's left hand and kept asking him about the panda. Papa, is the panda fat? Does it like eating and not running like Goldie? Poplar Fruit said with a smile, pandas like to eat bamboo, while Goldie likes to eat meat. The difference is huge. Besides, pandas love to climb trees. Papa, look, it's a panda. Kiki's eyes suddenly lit up. She excitedly patted her father's hand and pointed at the fence on the side of the road. Poplar Fruit turned around and couldn't help but laugh. How was that a panda? A yellow raccoon with a cat's beard, a bear's face, and yellow fur was climbing gracefully on the railing. Rubbing Kiki's little head, Poplar Fruit said with a smile, Kiki, that's not a panda, that's a raccoon. Pandas were the same clothes as you, with black and white circles. Before leaving today, Poplar Fruit specially took out Kiki's panda sweater from the suitcase and put on her. This sweater was originally designed according to the black and white color of pandas. With the panda hat with two small black ears, Kiki looked like a panda cub that had been wrongly carried. Poplar Fruit brought this sweater all the way from Yangshan just for this moment. Poplar Fruit and Kiki were sitting behind the electric scooter driver, so he heard the conversation between the father and daughter. The driver couldn't help but interrupt. Brother, in fact, your daughter is right. That's a panda, a red panda, not a raccoon. Poplar Fruit was stunned. He scratched his head and asked awkwardly, Sir, it's really not a raccoon? Poplar Fruit thought that the panda in front of him looked exactly like the crispy noodle that he had eaten when he was young. No, it's called a red panda. The driver smiled as he took out a flyer from the front drawer and handed it to Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit flipped through it and saw that it really was a red panda. Its snout was shorter, and its whole body was reddish-brown with white lines on its face. Poplar Fruit was embarrassed. Kiki was also looking at the flyer curiously. Poplar Fruit could only explain to her, Kiki, red pandas are different from pandas. Pandas are chubbier and cuter. When they arrived at the pandas area, Poplar Fruit followed the other tourists out of the scooter. They walked leisurely on the long and swaying suspension bridge, looking down at the valley where the pandas were playing. "Remember not to shout or use the flash to take photos," the tour guide said with a smile. "And this gentleman, please take good care of the child. Don't get too close to the railings of the suspension bridge." She was talking about poplar fruit. The tour guide was worried that he wouldn't be able to hold Kiki properly and accidentally drop Kiki. Although it was almost impossible for poplar fruit to make such a mistake, he still listened to the tour guide's instructions seriously. There were already tourists in front of them who were happily exclaiming in a low voice, "Look, pandas!" Poplar fruit walked to the middle of the suspension bridge with Kiki in his arms and looked in the direction of the tourists' gazes. They saw a group of pandas walking out of the small valley where the bamboo forest was sparse and the shrubs were mostly short. Poplar fruit counted that there were as many as 6 of them. They lined up in a long line and slowly walked along the small stream. "Kiki, look." Poplar fruit smiled and pointed to Kiki. "That's a panda. Wow, it's so big." Kiki's little mouth curled into an O shape. She happily pulled her father's hand and swayed it. "It's really chubby. Of course, why would I lie to you?" Poplar fruit smiled and said, "Look, the pandas are eating bamboo." The group of pandas below did not pay any attention to the tourists standing above them. Perhaps they were used to it, as they slowly spread out. A few of them were lying on the rocks, or lying on their bellies to bask in the sun. Their lazy posture made them seem even more charmingly naive. A few of them were gnawing on the bamboo leaves at the bottom. They were so greedy that they almost gnawed on their claws. Kiki looked and asked curiously, "Papa, is bamboo delicious?" This was really a big problem. Poplar fruit had never eaten bamboo before. How would he know if it was delicious? Poplar fruit could only smile and say, "Pandas like it very much. It should be delicious." Kiki innocently looked up and said, "Papa, Kiki also wants to eat bamboo." Poplar fruit laughed and said, "No problem. When we go back, Papa will cook bamboo shoots for you." In fact, it was more interesting to change the concept than to give a straightforward answer. Just like Kiki's mind was now full of childish fantasies, Poplar fruit hoped that she could maintain this curiosity and happiness, rather than using reality to extinguish her imagination. Chapter 494. In such a large base, there was naturally more than one area where pandas were active. Under the guidance of the tour guide, Poplar fruit and the others moved to another bamboo forest. Compared to the previous place, there were fewer layers of protective fences between the pandas and the tourists. According to the tour guide, most of the pandas here were artificially bred and had not yet recovered their wild nature. So when they saw the tourists, they were very affectionate. There were even pandas that stood up like humans and waved at the tourists in a simple and honest manner. Of course, the tourists were prohibited from having intimate contact with the pandas. It was not because they were worried that the gentle pandas would hurt the tourists, but to prevent the tourists from doing anything excessive to the pandas. This was also for safety reasons. The pandas looked chubby and cute, but did not look harmless. In fact, pandas were also carnivores, with developed canine and molar teeth and sharp claws, but now they had evolved into omnivores that mainly ate bamboo. Even so, if they were provoked, they would still lose their temper or violently hurt people. No matter how they were called pandas, they were still bears and not felines. Poplar fruit and Kiki stood in the crowd, laughing as they looked at the plump pandas. Suddenly, they heard the tourists' suppressed but happy laughter in front of them. Curious, Poplar fruit squeezed forward with Kiki in his arms. It turned out that a few pandas were climbing a tree, and one of them had already fallen down. Hearing the tourists' laughter, it shyly raised its paws to cover its eyes, even covering the big dark circles under its eyes. "Papa, the panda, what is it doing?" Kiki pulled Poplar fruit's collar and asked curiously. "It's climbing a tree." Poplar fruit smiled and said, "But it fell down." "What's the name of this panda?" Poplar fruit asked the tour guide next to him. The tour guide asked the zookeeper who was standing in front of the tourists to maintain order. The zookeeper smiled and said, "It's called Pang Pang. Because it likes to eat too much, it grew very, very fat. Now, it can't even climb a tree." Kiki bit her finger and pointed at the panda that was covering its eyes shyly and rolling on the ground. She asked in a childish voice, Papa, why is Pang Pang covering its eyes? Because it fell down and felt embarrassed, so it covered its eyes. Poplar Fruit smiled and said. As soon as he finished speaking, the giant panda named Pang Pang let go of his hands and tried to get up from the ground. However, because he was too fat, he struggled a few times before he could sit up. This caused the tourists to burst into laughter again. Chi-Chi cared for the giant panda with compassion and asked innocently, Papa, Chubby isn't shameful. Look, Pang Pang's eyes are black. Did it fall down? Kiki had fallen down once before, and there was a bruise on her small arm. It hurt when she touched it, although Poplar Fruit used his internal strength to dissolve the blood stasis at night. The pain during the day still left a deep impression on her. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, No, Pang Pang's eyes have always been black. Look at the panda on the tree, it's also black. Kiki nodded doubtfully. Obviously, Pang would not give up just because of one failure. It stubbornly climbed up the crooked tree, and then slowly climbed up with its claws on the bark. Poplar Fruit held Kiki's small hand and said with a smile, Kiki, look, Pang is climbing the tree again. Do you think Pang can climb up this time? Chi-Chi's eyes were wide open as she stared fixedly at Fatty. After hearing her father's question, she nodded resolutely and said seriously, Yes, Pang is very powerful. Pang seemed to be fatter than the other pandas. He didn't know how Kiki could tell that it was very powerful. Poplar Fruit smiled and rubbed his daughter's hair. He didn't refute her. The tourists all stopped and watched with interest as the fat panda climbed the tree for the second time. The people in front of them were crowded. Poplar Fruit was worried that his daughter couldn't see it, so he raised Kiki on top of his head and let her sit down on his neck. Pang's climbing process was not easy. It was quite thrilling, like a suspense movie. In the middle of it, it didn't hold on firmly once. Its body flipped, and it almost fell from the tree again. The tourists all exclaimed. Poplar Fruit also clearly felt that Kiki's grip on his hair instantly increased because of worry. However, Pang actually used its fat bear claws to hold on to the trunk. It swung in the air and still didn't fall. After struggling for a while, it finally bent its body and lay back on the trunk again. Pang is very powerful. Poplar Fruit didn't need a look. When he heard Kiki say this, he could picture Kiki's happy face with her little head held high in his mind. This action was definitely learned from Fong Bei. The two were like twin sisters, and their expressions were becoming more and more similar. However, this chubby and charmingly naive panda was definitely a black-bellied person. Yonghua held back her laughter as she watched it climb up the crooked tree with difficulty. Then, with a slap of its paw, the panda that had occupied the most comfortable position on the tree branch at the beginning was pushed down. Seeing this funny scene, the tourists burst into laughter again. Chi-Chi was also amused and giggled, her eyes revealing the light of joy. However, after a while, the panda that was pushed down climbed up the tree again. It confronted and wrestled with Pang on the trunk. In the end, the two pandas hugged each other and rolled down. This is wrong. Poplar Fruit took the opportunity to educate Kiki. Children should love each other. Kiki can't learn from Pang and fight. Finally, they came to the base's hospital. The various facilities in the hospital were like a human's obstetrics and gynecology building. In fact, this was indeed a breeding base for newborn panda cubs. The breeding of giant pandas was very cruel. In the wild, if a mother panda gave birth to two cubs, one of them would be abandoned to ensure the survival of at least one of them. Therefore, the giant panda base had to take up this responsibility and use artificial breeding methods to raise every single panda cub as much as possible. Through the glass window, Poplar Fruit and the tourists saw that the panda cub lying in the crib was already a few weeks old. Although its black hair was still a little light, it looked much cuter than a naked newborn panda cub. In this place, Chi-Chi was basically in a state where she saw her favorite toy. She clung to the window and refused to leave no matter what. Papa! Chi-Chi finally grabbed her father's clothes and desperately twisted around Yonghua's body like a spoiled child. She made an incredible request to bring a panda cub home to raise. Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Could a panda be brought home to raise? However, the cute panda cub had completely overflowed Kiki's love, and Poplar Fruit didn't listen to anything. Chapter 495. At first, the tourists who were with them gradually left, leaving only the helpless Poplar Fruit and Kiki in a stalemate. Kiki pouted and stood on the ground with a wronged expression. She turned her head and looked at the ground, unwilling to move. Poplar Fruit was helpless. He pondered for a long time before squatting down again and saying to Kiki, "Kiki, it's not that Daddy doesn't want you to bring the baby panda back, but if we bring it back, we won't be able to raise it. Kiki will share Granny with Chubby Fatty." Kiki twisted her body and looked at her father pitifully. She even gave the baby panda a name. Of course, it wasn't very creative. It was just an extension of the name of the panda that climbed the tree previously. But pandas eat bamboo. We don't have bamboo at home, so we can only drink Granny. The baby panda won't grow up. Poplar Fruit persuaded her emotionally and logically. Kiki, think about it. Pandas like to live in the forest. They climb trees every day and bask in the sun. Will it still be happy to live in our house? Kiki fell silent. She seemed to be gradually losing her previous persistence. Poplar Fruit saw this and struck while the iron was hot. Also, the baby panda's mother is here. If the baby panda goes home with us, it will be sad if it can't see its mother. When he said this, Poplar Fruit immediately saw Kiki's face darken. His heart thumped and he thought to himself, "Oh no, I said the wrong thing." Although Kiki was less than 1.5 years old, she knew everything. Especially when she was exposed to television. She knew early on that she was different from other children. Kiki didn't have a mother. In the beginning, Kiki would naively run over to her father and ask where her mother went. Poplar Fruit always evaded this question, so gradually, Kiki understood it herself. Although Kiki was envious when she saw other children being doted on by their mothers, she did not cause trouble for her father. That was because the love that her father gave her had long surpassed that of most complete families. Kiki pursed her lips and her big eyes became misty, but she didn't cry. She just choked and said, "Kiki can't see Mommy either." She spoke intermittently, but Poplar Fruit understood what his daughter meant. He knelt on one knee and took a step forward, gently hugging Kiki's small body in his arms. He lovingly kissed Kiki's forehead and said, "Daddy has always been by Kiki's side." Suddenly, Poplar Fruit had an idea. He gently stroked Kiki's palm and asked, "Kiki, other than Dad, you still have Bebe's sister." Actually, Dad has always wanted Bebe's sister to be Kiki's mother. "Do you like Kiki?" Kiki nestled in her father's arms and looked at the ground. She pouted and said pitifully, But Bebe's sister hasn't come to see Kiki for a long time. Does she not like Kiki anymore?" Bebe's sister has always liked Kiki, but she has been busy preparing for the competition, so she hasn't had time to see Kiki. Poplar Fruit saw that the topic was gradually moving away from Mommy. He finally breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. Also, Bebe's sister often misses our Kiki. When she called, she even asked how Kiki was doing. Did she dress up beautifully every day? Kiki's eyes revealed a trace of shyness. She moaned, shyly burrowed her head into her father's arms, and then whispered, "Papa, Kiki misses Bebe's sister." Poplar Fruit missed her too. He touched Kiki's little head and said with a smile, "Then let's go back tonight and call Bebe's sister. No, video call her, okay? Let Bebe's sister see that Kiki has grown up and become more beautiful recently." Kiki burrowed out of Poplar Fruit's arms, her face full of joy. She nodded and hugged her father's neck and kissed his cheek. She finally recovered from her melancholy mood. The sunny Kiki was still the cutest. "Then let's go back. Next time, if there's a chance, Daddy will bring Kiki to see the panda again." Poplar Fruit picked up Kiki and asked tentatively. Kiki turned her head and looked reluctantly at the panda cub, who was still sleeping soundly in the crib, unaware of the outside world. She struggled in her heart for a while, then nodded and whispered, "Okay." Poplar Fruit carried Kiki outside. Along the way, he saw Kiki constantly looking back. Poplar Fruit sighed in his heart. To be honest, If it weren't for the national regulations, there was no way to raise a panda cub at home. Poplar Fruit really wanted to bring a panda cub back to Kiki. Kiki had lost her mother when she was just born. Poplar Fruit owed Kiki too much on this point. Just as they were about to walk out of the hospital, Poplar Fruit inadvertently looked at the bulletin boards on both sides. It was already dark by the time they returned. The Land Rover drove steadily on the wide road, and the city lights in front of them came into view. Poplar Fruit raised his head and looked at Kiki, who was sitting in the baby's seat in the back seat, smiling foolishly from ear to ear. He smiled silently and shook his head. Poplar Fruit paid a big price for Kiki to be able to smile so happily all the way back. When they left the hospital, Poplar Fruit saw the pictures of celebrities adopting panda cubs on the bulletin boards of the base. In that instant, he changed his mind. He couldn't really raise a panda at home, but he could let Kiki adopt one at the base. Adopting a panda wasn't an easy thing to do. Needless to say, the procedures were complicated. Poplar Fruit worked from noon to night. The most important thing was that the adoption fee was very expensive. Adopting a panda for a year would cost 40 to 50,000 yuan, and Poplar Fruit spent 1 million yuan to adopt the panda cub that Kiki liked for life. This ignorant panda cub was officially named Xiao Pang Pang by Kiki. At that time, it wasn't just Poplar Fruit, but the zookeepers next to them were all speechless. 1 million yuan for such an uninteresting name. Only Poplar Fruit, who loved his daughter, could do something like this. Of course, spending so much money wasn't just for a name. The base promised that Poplar Fruit and Kiki could visit the base as long as Xiao Pang Pang lived. Furthermore, they could see Xiao Pang Pang's photos and updates on his daily life every week on the official website. For Kiki, this was really an unexpected surprise. Although she couldn't bring it home, when she heard her father say that this Xiao Pang Pang would be Kiki's little friend in the future, Kiki hugged her father happily and kissed him hard, her saliva smearing her father's face. Poplar Fruit didn't really care about the 1 million yuan, nor did he want to use money to make up for it, because he felt guilty. He just felt that as long as his daughter could maintain a happy smile, nothing else mattered. Chapter 496. The hole that I dug with more than 1 million words is finally starting to be filled. Yang's state of mind was very good. It could be said that the 1 million that he had donated didn't make him feel worried. The next day, he took Chi-Chi and Gold to play in the streets of Shudu City as if nothing had happened. Shudu City was the economic and cultural center of the entire Sichuan province. It was like the beginning of a ray of light. With Shudu City as the starting point, one could easily reach every scenic spot in Sichuan province. There was no need to even mention the fun places like Juzhegu and Dujianjian that they had planned beforehand. Now, Yanghua excitedly covered all the places she had visited with a map of delicacies she found online. Just like that, a leisurely trip went by for a week. Compared to the hurried trip with Song Jiwen, Poplar Fruit could be said to be very comfortable this week. He did not have to drive overnight, did not have to look around, and could even take a lot of photos to stimulate Song Jiwen, who had already started work again. However, after a week of traveling, Poplar Fruit looked at the time. There were less than 5 days to the Applied Translation Conference. Although Sichuan province was adjacent to Shicheng, Poplar Fruit still decided to leave early and go to the conference to find out more. When leaving Shudu City, Poplar Fruit did not use the GPS for the first time, nor did he walk on the highway. There were many reasons. First, he had walked around Shudu City so many times during this period of time that he was quite familiar with the roads around Shudu City. Poplar Fruit had even been to Maishan City and Leshan City. Even without a map, he knew where to go. Second, he felt that driving on the highway would lose the meaning of traveling. There were only a few lanes on the highway, and both sides were surrounded by green belts and fences. What could he see? He might as well take the highway. He had time anyway. No matter how many reasons there were, in the end, he could not blame others if he got lost. Yes, Poplar Fruit was lost. To be exact, he took the wrong road. Originally, after arriving at the inner river, they could have rested for a night and entered the great city the next day. However, Poplar Fruit drove onto another road. The scenery on the highway was beautiful. Outside the car window, The mountains were undulating, and the road was lined with trees. The summer breeze was gentle, and Kiki sang and danced along the way. This caused Poplar Fruit to forget to pay attention to the signs by the roadside. They drove past the border of the city, but he foolishly thought that he was driving slowly and that they had not reached their destination yet. By the time Poplar Fruit came back to his senses, it was almost dusk. He had arrived at Junyi City, the place that Song Jiwen had mentioned earlier. That's right, he had actually returned to the mountainous Guishan province. With no other choice, Poplar Fruit stayed in Junyi for another night. The next day, he turned back and drove in a different direction to Cheng City. This time, he still didn't follow the GPS. He thought that as long as he knew the direction, he wouldn't go wrong if he kept going north. Indeed, Cheng City happened to be in the north of Guishan province. Of course, this was also because Poplar Fruit didn't care much if he took the wrong road. He had plenty of time. If he took the wrong road, he would only have to pay the price of gas. When going out on a road trip, he pursued freedom. If he rigidly followed the planned route, he might as well sign up for a travel agency. However, if he took the wrong road, not only would he see more beautiful scenery, he might also encounter unexpected situations. For example, robbers. Guishan province, with its green mountains and beautiful rivers, was relatively poor. Among the few provinces in the southwest, it was only slightly better than Bianzong province. However, Bianzong province was in a special geographical location and couldn't be compared. Guishan province was different. Its economic situation couldn't even be compared to provinces with worse natural conditions. Green mountains and beautiful rivers became barren hills and unruly rivers. This stimulated some people to take the risk out of desperation. The place Poplar Fruit was passing through was an autonomous county of the Miao people. In Poplar Fruit's opinion, the scenery here was very beautiful. The mountain peaks in the distance were steep, and the ancient trees towered into the sky nearby. It was a good place that hadn't been developed yet. However, he didn't know that it was because the mountain peaks were too steep, the terrain was too rugged, and the forest was lush with wild beasts. Therefore, very few people were willing to invest here. The road that Poplar Fruit was driving now was the only road in the area that wasn't very smooth. It was narrow and difficult to walk on. The cow dung and horse dung on the road had dried up into patches, and the road shoulders were destroyed by the thick roots of the trees. Even so, the construction of this road a few years ago still used up most of the savings and energy of the people in the villages in the mountains. However, after the construction, the joy of success didn't come for a long time, and the situation of no one asking about it didn't improve. When there was no way out, some people would have evil thoughts in their minds. They would block the road and rob passing tourists or merchants. This was news that emerged endlessly in Guishan province, but was suppressed by the government. The Miao people were simple and honest, but there were also times when they were forced to do something. On the road ahead, there was such a case. Xiongju was very nervous today. He was lying on the dense tree, with one hand gently clasping a rope and the other holding a long, solid wooden stick. There is a circle of old hoop marks on the wooden stick, indicating its origin. It was once the handle of a hoe. Xiongju's palm, holding the wooden stick, was full of sweat at the moment. He was so nervous that he didn't even think of changing the position of his grip. There was only one thought left in his mind. Coming. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. 2 days ago, he almost broke his teeth when he made the decision to block the road and rob people. However, he waited on this remote mountain road for 2 days, but he didn't see the target of his robbery. There were few people coming and going on this mountain road, so he didn't see anyone for a long time. It was impossible for Xiongju to rob the poor villagers who drove motorcycles, so he could only wait for the rich to pass by. From afar, Xiongju heard the roar of Poplar Fruit's Land Rover as it climbed the mountain, and then he saw the big car that looked expensive from the outside. However, Xiongju only felt perturbed at the moment when he was about to make a move. His nervousness almost suffocated him, and this former Miao farmer even had the thought of running away at the last minute. Poplar Fruit didn't know about all this. Even on such a road, Poplar Fruit could handle it with ease. He could do 2 or even 3 things at once. Poplar Fruit complained in his heart about why this road was so difficult to walk on, and at the same time, he smiled and chatted with Kiki, who was sitting in the passenger seat, and asked her to look at the scenery outside. Chi-Chi felt as if she was on a roller coaster ride. This feeling was extremely fun. She cried out happily nonstop, and even chattered to share her joy with her father. However, Poplar Fruit didn't think that he would encounter danger. He was full of leisure and joy until he suddenly found that less than 5 meters in front of the car, a big black shadow suddenly fell down with a plop. Chapter 497. The thing that fell was black, very big, and very heavy. It scraped a lot of branches and leaves as it fell. With a bang, it smashed a hole in the ground. It happened so suddenly that Poplar Fruit didn't even have time to see what fell. It was very likely that it was a rock, but it wasn't the time to pay attention to it. Before he could scream, Poplar Fruit turned the steering wheel almost subconsciously. However, a distance was too close. When the big rock fell, it was only about 5 meters away from the front of the car. No matter how slow Poplar Fruit drove, no matter how fast he turned the steering wheel, he couldn't move the Land Rover's huge body away from the big rock. With a loud bang, Poplar Fruit felt the left side of the car hit the big rock. Before Poplar Fruit could figure out what was going on, because he turned the steering wheel and stepped on the brakes too quickly, he accidentally stepped on the gas pedal, causing the car to skid. The car suddenly jumped and crashed into a big tree on the right side of the road. The big trees here were not comparable to the fast-growing trees in the city's greenbelt. No matter how strong Poplar Fruit's Land Rover was, it was like an egg hitting a rock in front of a big tree that required 5 or 6 people to wrap their arms around. This sudden crash was even more serious than when it was hit by the big rock. The car lights were broken, the front of the car was dented, and the front windshield was broken. Poplar Fruit only felt his body being thrown by inertia, and his whole body fell towards the steering wheel. At that moment, there were only 2 words left in Poplar Fruit's mind: Kiki. After the accident, Poplar Fruit's first concern wasn't himself or the expensive Land Rover, but Kiki, who was sitting in the passenger seat. Although Kiki was protected by the baby safety seat, Poplar Fruit had never been in an accident before, so he didn't have any confidence in the safety of the baby safety seat. In this extremely dangerous situation, the Poplar Fruit showed an astonishing reaction speed. The moment the car hit the tree, it was as if time had been stretched out. Even 0.1 seconds felt as long as 10,000 years. Poplar Fruit quickly reached out his slender right hand. Although his body couldn't resist the inertia, his hand was able to block Kiki's path, preventing Kiki's body from moving forward again. Bang! A white airbag rapidly expanded in front of Poplar Fruit's eyes. The safety of the Land Rover was reflected at this moment. The airbag's response was very fast. Before Poplar Fruit hit the steering wheel, the airbag had expanded so much that it almost filled half of the driver's seat. Poplar Fruit's face was completely sunk in. It stinks. That was his first thought. The second feeling was that he couldn't breathe. The whole space seemed to be blocked by the front airbag and the side airbag. Poplar Fruit's head was so deep that he couldn't lift his head to breathe. In fact, the impact wasn't very serious. Because of the mountain road, Poplar Fruit had been driving at less than 20 kilometers per hour, and the last step on the accelerator didn't cause too much danger. However, the airbag that had just protected Poplar Fruit seemed to have become a hindrance at this moment. Because it had expanded too much, Poplar Fruit's upper body could barely move. Poplar Fruit knew that the one in the most danger now wasn't him. It was Kiki, whose body was the most fragile. He didn't know if Kiki was hurt because of the crash, but the airbag was covering Kiki's little face. If it wasn't released in time, Kiki would be in danger of suffocating. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit still had a right hand in front of Kiki. Poplar Fruit opened and cupped his right hand, creating a small gap for Kiki. Immediately, Poplar Fruit heard Kiki's weak crying. Poplar Fruit became more and more anxious. He twisted his dizzy head and tried to recall the Land Rover's manual that he had read when he bought the car. Airbag, airbag. It took Yonghua a lot of effort to find the page about the airbag from the memory that she had only briefly scanned through at that time. Poplar Fruit turned his head and found that the airbag had gradually deflated. He also regained his ability to move. That's more like it. Poplar Fruit laughed at himself. How could the manufacturer not consider this problem? He used his left hand to push open the airbag in front of him and turned to look at Kiki. Kiki was actually very safe. With the safety seatbelt and the protection of her father's palm, she was sitting in the same position as Mount Tai. It was just that the scene just now was too sudden, and Kiki was also frightened. Turning her head, Kiki pouted and kept sobbing. She aggrievedly reached out her hands to seek comfort from her most trusted father. Poplar Fruit quickly unbuckled his seatbelt, stepped over the middle of the armrest area, and rescued his daughter from the safety seat. Poplar Fruit hugged the somewhat frightened Kiki in front of him and kept patting her back and comforting her with words. At this time, he took a peek at the situation of the car. Needless to say, the front seat was in a terrible state. The computer in the back seat fell directly from the shelf to the ground. He didn't know if it was smashed or not, and the materials in the car were also squeezed together due to inertia. The gold seemed to be stuck in the suitcase and other things that fell down. It kept making weak, whining sounds, as if it was calling for help, and also seemed to be expressing its inner panic. Knock, 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 knock. Suddenly, there were a few knocks on the car window. Poplar Fruit turned his head in surprise and saw a dark and thin man standing outside with a strange expression. The man standing there was Xiong Jiwu. When he pulled the trigger and threw the stone down from the tree, it was already a little late. If he didn't hesitate, Poplar Fruit's car wouldn't have hit the stone and the tree so quickly. This car accident was already out of his script. Xiong Jiwu hid in the tree and was dumbfounded. He even wanted to run away. Someone died. Someone died. Xiong Jiwu climbed down from the tree with a sad face and crept toward the big car in fear. Poplar Fruit's car window was covered with a reflective glass film, so it was impossible to see the situation inside from the outside. Xiong Jiwu saw that there was no movement for a long time and only felt that his throat was dry. In the end, he couldn't help but knock on the car window. If this action was seen by other road bandits, they would definitely slap him to death. Too amateur. Knocking on the car window, like knocking on the door, was as stupid as a thief who wanted to sneak into someone's house to steal and knock on the door to see if the owner was awake. Seeing the dark and thin man dressed as a farmer outside, Poplar Fruit was stunned, but he didn't think too much about it. He thought that the farmer nearby heard the sound of the car accident and rushed over. Poplar Fruit still didn't understand what was going on with the main culprit, Big Stone. Until now, he still thought that his car accident was an accident. Chapter 498. A fellow countryman is here? Great. Seeing Xiong Jiwu, Poplar Fruit was very happy. At first, he picked up his mobile phone and saw that there was no signal. Poplar Fruit thought that he had a car accident in the wilderness. Now he was in trouble. Xiong Jiwu was still looking into the car window when the door suddenly moved. He was so scared that he limped back, completely forgetting the existence of the big wooden stick in his hand that was as thick as an ordinary person's forearm. After taking a few steps back, he saw a tall man's leg stretching out from the open door. At the moment when Poplar Fruit got out of the car, even if Xiong Jiwu was not a woman, he was still dazzled by Poplar Fruit's handsomeness. His first thought was, how could this kid be so tall? His second thought was, how could this kid be so white? Although all kinds of admiring thoughts were surging in Xiong Jiwu's mind. In fact, when Poplar Fruit came out, he was very embarrassed. The car door was a bit jammed and could only open a small gap, so he had to squeeze out from the side of the small gap. Originally, because of the car accident, his hair was a bit messy. After squeezing out, his white shirt was caught somewhere and several buttons on the top broke off. Even so, the messy hairstyle and clothes could not hide the charm of Poplar Fruit. He was originally a big boy with sunshine. With just a slight smile, it was as if the whole forest was filled with bright sunshine, warm and warm. After several buttons on the top of the shirt broke off, it highlighted Poplar Fruit's perfect figure even more. In the past, when he wore clothes, he only looked tall and skinny. No one would think that Yonghua was as good as him. His chest and abdominal muscles were as sharp as a knife. Although they were not obvious, their appearance was even more attractive. Poplar Fruit first smiled apologetically to Xiongzhiwu, who was still a little confused and stiff. What made him stunned was apologize? What did this mean? Who was apologizing to whom? Was there a mistake? Poplar Fruit bent down and carried Kiki out of the car. She was still anxious when she couldn't see her father. Seeing our little fairy's pitiful appearance with her hair stuck to her cheeks by her tears, Poplar Fruit lovingly helped her tidy up her messy hair and then gently patted her little face to comfort her. After finishing his work, Poplar Fruit raised his head and smiled at the silly Xiongzhiwu, fellow countryman. As soon as Poplar Fruit called out, Xiongzhiwu hurriedly retreated a few steps. He didn't know why, but when he saw Poplar Fruit smile, he felt flustered. Poplar Fruit was very depressed. Although he was not the most handsome man in the world, his appearance was not bad. How could he scare the people of minority nationality like this? Xiongzhiwu swallowed his saliva with great effort and then slightly opened his mouth as he looked at Poplar Fruit with hesitation. Xiongzhiwu was experiencing the biggest struggle in his life. Snatch or not? Xiongzhiwu was in a dilemma. Snatch, seeing that Poplar Fruit was still holding a lovely and beautiful baby in his arms. He felt that his conscience was being condemned. However, if he didn't snatch, Xiongzhiwu thought of the 2 children at home and his wife who was still lying in the hospital bed, and his heart was filled with bitterness. In Xiongzhiwu's view, Poplar Fruit, who looked like a scholar, was the best choice. Poplar Fruit's appearance was once again deceiving others. Besides, in this desolate place, if he missed it, he wouldn't be able to wait for a few more weeks for a rich person to pass by. And he didn't have so much time to wait. Xiongzhiwu swallowed his saliva hard. His palms were full of sweat. He pinched the big wooden stick and made up his mind. He waved the big wooden stick, pointed it at Poplar Fruit, and shouted this. Cough, cough, cough. Xiongzhiwu didn't know if he was too nervous or swallowed his saliva too hard, but he was choked by his own saliva as soon as he shouted, causing him to cough violently. Poplar Fruit was also shocked by the stick he waved, but when he saw Xiongzhiwu covering his throat and coughing violently, Poplar Fruit couldn't help laughing. Xiongzhiwu finally stopped coughing. He endured the pain in his throat and shouted with a trembling voice, "This road is mine. I opened it. This road is mine. If you want to pass through this road, you have to pay for the road." Xiongzhiwu's Mandarin accent was very heavy, but this line was so classic that one could guess the meaning without hearing it clearly. He saw that Poplar Fruit just frowned and didn't respond at all, so he shouted again, "Hey, this is robbery." Xiongzhiwu shouted very hard. It was unknown if he was cheering himself up with his loud voice. Poplar Fruit's warm eyes gradually turned cold. He was not stupid. When he thought of the big stone that suddenly fell from the tree and Xiongzhiwu's appearance, Poplar Fruit had some doubts in his heart. Hearing Xiongzhiwu's words, he was more and more certain of the doubts in his heart. Just now, was it you who did it? Poplar Fruit turned sideways and protected Kiki with one hand, although he was not afraid of the weak Meow Man in front of him. After all, Xiongzhiwu had a big wooden stick in his hand. Who knew if he would hurt Kiki when he waved it? At this time, Xiongzhiwu made up his mind and planned to go all the way. He straightened his neck and said in a rough voice, "I did it, but I didn't expect you to hit the tree." A person's momentum was supported by his strength. Take Xiongzhiwu as an example. He did not make a living by robbing, so he could not pretend to be a robber. In the beginning, he still had the courage to speak, but in the end, he was busy explaining himself. The momentum that he had pretended to be good collapsed in an instant. "So, my daughter and I almost had a car accident. This was also caused by you?" Poplar Fruit's eyes were spurting flames of anger. He stepped forward and asked. He didn't like to lose his temper, but Kiki was his reverse scale. Poplar Fruit knew how dangerous the situation was just now. If it weren't for the excellent protective performance of the Land Rover and his driving speed, he and Kiki would have really had an accident just now. Poplar Fruit might be spared. After all, his physical fitness was there, but what about Kiki? She was still a child. Xiongju was scared by poplar fruit and took 2 more steps back. From the beginning, he kept retreating, and he almost retreated from one side of the road to the other side. When Xiongju heard poplar fruit's reproach, a trace of regret flashed in his eyes. His conscience was being dissected piece by Xiao Dao. However, he couldn't retreat anymore, and he couldn't be afraid anymore. Holding the big wooden stick in his hand, which seemed to be the source of his strength, Xiongju once again gathered his courage. He took a step forward, keeping a certain distance from poplar fruit, and then pointed the wooden stick at poplar fruit's nose from distance. "Cut the crap." Xiongju's voice was a little strong. He shouted with difficulty, "I am a robber. You give me the money." If there were other road robbers in this world, they would definitely slap this guy to death without hesitation. He was such a disgrace to the road robbers. Chapter 499. Poplar Fruit was so angry that he wanted to laugh. He could see that the meow man in front of him, who was dressed like a farmer, was not very agile. His left leg was lame, and he was swaying when he walked. Poplar Fruit really could not figure out where his confidence to rob him came from. In fact, Xiongju did not dare to hit him with the wooden stick. With Kiki there, he was a little afraid of hitting the rat for fear of breaking the vases. Even if Kiki was not there, he would not be able to get over hitting people with a wooden stick. So he was just playing psychological warfare. In Xiongju's impression, the people in the city were very delicate and afraid of pain and death. It was very likely that they would be frightened by his stick, so he could rob the money without having to do anything. However, he met Poplar Fruit. Xiongju probably did not expect that the first time he came out to commit a crime and waited for 2 days before he made up his mind to rob the target was actually a kung fu master. "Why did you choose us?" Poplar Fruit asked softly. This question made Xiongju stunned for a moment, and his attention, which had been tightly guarded, became a little absent-minded. Poplar Fruit had been waiting for this moment. Although he disdained to care about Xiongju, Kiki was in his arms, so Poplar Fruit could not be careless. Seeing Xiongju's eyes drifting, Poplar Fruit suddenly jumped, and his left hand stretched out like a snake coming out of a hole. Before Xiongju could react, Poplar Fruit's wrist turned in the air, and the other end of the big wooden stick was tightly clasped between his thumb and forefinger. Xiongju was shocked. He wanted to pull back and grab the big wooden stick back. However, at this time, a huge force came from the wooden stick, which he could not resist at all. Instead, Xiongju's body was pulled by the wooden stick, and he staggered a few steps forward. He did not know if it was because of his inconvenient left leg, but Xiongju groaned and fell in the middle of the road. At this moment, it was obvious who had the upper hand. The wooden stick had also changed hands. Poplar Fruit's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He turned his left wrist forcefully, and the thick and long wooden stick turned into a beautiful stick flower in his hand. It could be said that Poplar Fruit hated Xiongju to the core for causing him and his daughter to encounter such a great danger. Without the slightest hesitation, he waved the wooden stick and swung it in a big circle in the air, about to hit Xiongju. "Wah!" Kiki's sudden sobbing in her father's ear made his left hand move sluggishly. The wooden stick that was ready to be used was stopped by him. Poplar Fruit hurriedly turned to look at his daughter and asked anxiously, "Kiki, what's wrong?" Kiki stretched out her 2 small arms and hugged her father's neck with all her strength. She was scared and said with a sobbing tone, "Papa, don't fight, okay? Kiki is so scared." In fact, it was the first time that Kiki had seen Poplar Fruit's ferocious expression because of anger. She was a little scared. However, no matter what Poplar Fruit had become, in Kiki's heart, her father would always be her closest and most beloved patron saint. That was why Kiki had the courage to hug her father and not let him do anything wrong again. Poplar Fruit looked at the pitiful Kiki with tears on her face. Her 2 big eyes were filled with uneasiness and worry at this moment, which made the angry Poplar Fruit's heart suddenly soften. He not only stopped the movement of his hand, but also threw the big wooden stick in his hand far away. "Don't be afraid. Papa doesn't fight." Poplar Fruit gently combed Kiki's hair on the tips of her ears and said with a smile, "If Kiki doesn't like it, Papa won't do it." Her father's intimate and warm tone was like a spring breeze that dissolved the iciness and unfamiliarity brought about by his previous expression. Chi-Chi became happy again, and her cloudy mood turned sunny all of a sudden. She even left a wet and loving kiss mark on her father's handsome face. After Xiongjuwu's stick was snatched away by Poplar Fruit, he fell to the ground, and there was only one thought left in his mind. He was dead. If it were him, he would not show mercy to a road bandit who wanted to rob him a few seconds ago. Hearing the sound of the wooden stick breaking through the air, Xiongjuwu closed his eyes in despair, waiting for the sharp pain of the wooden stick falling down. However, the wooden stick did not fall as expected. In a trance, Xiongjuwu heard the voices of Poplar Fruit and Kiki, and then heard the sound of Poplar Fruit throwing the wooden stick far away. He breathed a sigh of relief and fell to the ground powerlessly. Poplar Fruit had just given him too much pressure. Even if he fell to the ground, his back was wet with sweat, and his navy blue jacket was stuck to his body. After a long time, Xiongjuwu lowered his head and got up from the ground. Today's robbery was a failure. Although he had not been caught by Poplar Fruit yet, did he still need to be caught? Xiongjuwu's left leg was congenitally deformed. It was not obvious from the outside, but he could not walk with strength. He could only limp as a crutch. Without his biggest reliance, the wooden stick, Xiongjuwu could not even beat a rural woman, let alone the young man Poplar Fruit, who could dodge his wooden stick empty-handed. He couldn't beat him, and he couldn't run away. Now, Xiongjuwu was in the state of being a fish on a chopping board. Poplar Fruit promised Kiki not to fight again, but it did not mean that Poplar Fruit would let Xiongjuwu go. He was still angry. On the one hand, he and Kiki were in danger. In any case, he could not let Xiongjuwu go easily. On the other hand, his beloved car was damaged. The front of the car was in a mess. He did not know whether the engine was damaged or not, but the headlights and windshield were smashed. Then, there was also a problem with the door. Poplar Fruit knew that it was impossible for his Land Rover to go on the road again without a major repair. At this time, Poplar Fruit remembered that Goldie was stuck in the rear compartment. He carried Kiki to the rear compartment and opened the back door. After opening the door, Poplar Fruit was stunned for a moment. Then he smiled. Goldie was really lucky. It was coincidentally stuck in a small space. Although it could not move, because several suitcases and supply bags were just right around each other, the small space was still solid and did not collapse. Seeing its master appear, Goldie whimpered twice. It could not even wag its tail. The whole dog was clamped into a ball with its hands and feet tied. Poplar Fruit quickly pulled the luggage bag above, then pulled open a suitcase. Goldie shook a little and got out. It quickly jumped out of the rear compartment and whimpered with lingering fear. It desperately rubbed against Poplar Fruit's shoes. Just when Poplar Fruit rescued Goldie, Xiongjuwu's eyes moved. He wanted to take the opportunity to escape. But after looking at the surrounding terrain, Xiongjuwu lowered his head in disappointment. On this section of the road, there were bushes that could not be climbed over, and on the other side was the forest where Poplar Fruit had crashed. It was impossible to escape. Then, there were only two directions left on the road to escape. However, with his crippled left leg, how could he possibly escape? At first, Xiongjuwu chose this area because he thought that he could use the terrain to prevent the other party from escaping. He did not expect that he would end up digging such a big hole for himself. Hey, don't play dead there. Poplar Fruit came over and pointed at his car impolitely. Look at what you have done. Chapter 500. If it were any other time, Poplar Fruit wouldn't have said such harsh words, but today was different. Xiongjuwu had caused Poplar Fruit and Kiki to be so miserable. Poplar Fruit was so angry that he didn't beat him with a stick. Did he want Poplar Fruit to be kind to him? Xiongjuwu was surprisingly calm at this time. He didn't panic like he did at the beginning of the robbery. He lowered his head and asked in a low voice, "What do you want?" Poplar Fruit was a little angry and amused. He pointed to the Land Rover behind him, which could no longer be driven, and said, "What do you want? You've ruined my car. What do you think?" Xiong Jiwoo didn't answer. Poplar Fruit paused for a while, then took out his mobile phone and said angrily, "You don't want to talk, right? Then call the police. The police will deal with it as they will. You have to pay as much as you need to." "I don't have any money." Xiong Jiwoo raised his head and said with a frustrated look. Poplar Fruit saw that there was still no signal on his mobile phone. He put down his hand again and sneered, "No money? Tell your family to bring money in exchange for you." Xiong Jiwoo raised his head and looked at Poplar Fruit. He took a deep breath, but he also knew in his heart that it was impossible to resist Poplar Fruit. Xiong Jiwoo struggled for a while before he finally smiled sadly and said, "Don't harass my family. I'll take responsibility for what I did." "What responsibility? What responsibility do you have?" Speaking of this, Poplar Fruit was so angry that he kicked a small stone on the ground and said angrily, "As long as you don't harass my family, I'll do whatever you want." Xiong Jiwoo staggered to his feet. His legs were weak, but he still straightened his back. His eyes were full of reluctance and worry, but he resolutely said, "If my death can be exchanged for your forgiveness, I can jump off the mountain now." Xiong Jiwoo's expression showed that he was not joking. He actually struggled and limped up the mountain, dragging one of his legs. It seemed that he wanted to climb over the bushes and jump to end everything. Poplar Fruit was really shocked by Xiong Jiwoo's desperate action. He frowned and shouted, "Hey, what are you doing? I didn't say I wanted you dead." Xiong Jiwoo's crime was very serious, but it did not warrant death. Poplar Fruit also did not have the right to decide a person's life and death, nor did he have the cruel thought. Xiong Jiwoo looked back at Poplar Fruit and said desolately, "I don't have any money to compensate you. I really don't. If you force me, I can only apologize with my death." "I say, you're really something." Yangguo was flustered and exasperated as she scolded. "Why do you always think about death? Do you have a family? Have you ever considered them? If you die, what will happen to them?" No matter how he looked at it, Xiong Jiwoo was at the age of being a father. The age of being a father here was not a strange existence like Poplar Fruit. Xiong Jiwoo looked nearly 40 years old. If he were to get married and have children at the age of 20 to 30, his children would be about 10 years old. Poplar Fruit was a father himself. He had also experienced life and death, so he knew the importance of a complete family. Whether it was a father or a mother, if one of them was missing, the sky in which the child grew up would be less colorful. Therefore, Poplar Fruit wanted to make Xiong Jiwoo give up the idea of killing himself by reprimanding him. However, he did not expect that his words would completely hit Xiong Jiwoo's disheartened heart. Wah! Under Poplar Fruit's stunned gaze, Xiong Jiwoo fell to the ground like a child and cried bitterly. "Hey, no, I didn't mean that." Poplar Fruit was at a loss for what to do with a crying girl, let alone a man in front of him. However, Xiong Jiwoo did not care about his identity as a man who did not cry easily. He cried louder and louder, as if the grievances and helplessness that he had suppressed for a long time had completely broken out at this moment. His voice was so miserable that it made people feel sad. Kiki, who was squatting beside Goldie, heard the cry resounding through the valley. The kind little girl's eyes also turned red. She trotted to her father. After Poplar Fruit picked her up, Kiki asked with tears of compassion, "Papa, why is Uncle crying?" Poplar Fruit could not answer this question. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Maybe this uncle is sad about something." As the saying went, a man does not cry easily, only because he has not been sad. Hearing Xiong Jiwoo cry so sadly, Poplar Fruit also felt sad and felt bad. He always felt as if he had done something bad. Okay. Poplar Fruit finally could not help saying loudly, "You don't have to pay for it, okay? Don't cry. Really, are you still a man?" To be honest, Poplar Fruit did not care much about the money for repairing the car. When he bought the car, in order to leave a good impression on He Wonjua, Bosqua also gave him the highest car insurance. In such an accident, if Poplar Fruit insisted that it was an accident, the insurance company could pay for it in full. The reason why Poplar Fruit insisted on making Xiong Jiwoo pay before was just to teach him a lesson. After all, he caused a father and daughter to be in a car accident. Although he was not injured, he was very angry in his heart. Now Poplar Fruit's anger was washed away by Xiong Jiwu's tears. He was very annoyed by the crying, so he simply did not ask him to pay for it. Of course, this also had something to do with the fact that Xiong Jiwu did not look like a bad person. If Xiong Jiwu was a vicious person who often did this kind of thing, Poplar Fruit would not only ask him to pay, but also call the police and put him in jail. Yang's words didn't make Xiong Jiwu feel happy. His mood was still heavy. Although his crying gradually stopped, his expression was still depressed, and his depressed appearance didn't reduce at all. "I don't think you often do this kind of thing, do you?" Poplar Fruit frowned and asked as he remembered Xiong Jiwu's timid look when he waved the wooden stick before. First time, Xiong Jiwu lowered his head and said in a hoarse voice, "Hey, I bumped into him the first time." Poplar Fruit shook his head and smiled helplessly. "I really don't know if I should say that it's my misfortune or your fortune. It's because you met me." Yang pointed at her own nose and said, "If it were another driver with your 3 axes, they would have already been beaten to death." Xiong Jiwu lowered his head and said nothing. He knew what Poplar Fruit meant. His left leg was not flexible, and his body was not strong enough due to the lack of nutrition since he was a child. In the past, anyone in the village could bully him, let alone the drivers outside. "You used to be a farmer, right?" Poplar Fruit asked. "Yes," Xiong Jiwu replied in a low voice. "I say, you were doing well as a farmer. Why did you become a road bandit?" Poplar Fruit patted the ground on the road and said angrily, "If you could have lived a dutiful life, why did you have to take risks? Aren't you afraid of being caught?" Chapter 501. Do you think I want to do that? After being scolded by Poplar Fruit, Xiong Jiwu, who had been acting very cowardly, suddenly burst out and roared in a hoarse voice. Poplar Fruit and Kiki were shocked by his hysteria all of a sudden. Before Xiong Jiwu finished speaking, he tore off the headscarf on his head and hammered the ground with red eyes, as if the earth and the mountain had bullied him. "Do you think I want to rob? Do you think I don't want to live a good life with my wife and children?" In the end, Xiong Jiwu knelt on the ground, buried his head between his arms that had just hammered the ground, and said in a choked voice, "If I wasn't forced into a dead end, how could I think of doing such an illegal thing?" Poplar Fruit gradually understood the grievances and unwillingness behind his intermittent narration. Xiong Jiwu came from a remote Hmong village in this mountain range. There were many mountains and rivers in Guishan province. Many places were like here, with steep mountains and impassable roads. Even like Xiong Jiwu's hometown, some Hmong villages did not see many outsiders all year round. Not to mention the problem of economic development. Sometimes, they would be thankful if the county magistrate could give them enough money to save the poor. Although there were many rivers in Guishan province, it could not stop the continuous drought in recent years. The young and strong people in the Hmong village found that the several acres of terraced fields at home could not get enough food and clothing, so they went out to work. They could only come back once or twice a year, but they were very satisfied if they could earn enough money for their whole family. Xiong Jiwu was physically disabled, so he could not compare with others in farming. After the climate became dry, his income plummeted. In order to make a living, Xiong Jiwu once followed the young men in the village to work in Guangdong province. However, the biggest problem he faced was his disabled left leg. No one was willing to hire a migrant worker with physical disability. Even the cheapest restaurant dishwasher was a nimble Annie. After spending all his money, Xiong Jiwu slept on the bridge and picked up garbage. In the end, he was caught by the urban management and locked up for a few days. Xiong Jiwu went out full of hope, but came back dejectedly. In such a big city, there was no place for him to stay. After he came back, the situation did not improve much. His wife, who had always been tolerant of him, had recently fallen seriously ill. Although it was not a terminal illness, this kind of gynecological disease would really become a terminal illness if it dragged on. His wife was sick in bed. Xiong Jiwu emptied all the savings at home, but it was not even half of the medical expenses. Moreover, there was another problem in front of Xiong Jiwu. His eldest daughter, Xiong Xiaolin, had scored an unexpectedly high score in the junior high exam this year. In other words, she could enter the best junior high school in the county after a month. After Seong Ji-woo received the news, he was both happy and worried, and even more worried. He was happy that his daughter was successful. For so many years, there were so many children in the village, but only a few could be admitted into the junior high school in the county. If they couldn't get into the junior high school in the county, it meant that they couldn't study. Seong Xiaolin was the first child in the village to get into the best junior high school in the county. After bumping into a wall in a big city for a year, Seong Ji-woo's horizons had been broadened a lot. Moreover, he deeply understood a truth. For farmers in remote areas like them who had no foundation, studying was the only way out. It was because he had no skills, no body, and even his cultural level had only reached the point where he could recognize words clearly. Therefore, it was difficult for him to move around in a big city. Seong Xiaolin's future would definitely be bright if she could enter the best junior high school in the county. Seong Ji-woo was very clear about this, so he was very happy. However, studying also cost money. According to the current situation of the Seong family, the family's money was just enough for Seong Xiaolin's tuition and miscellaneous expenses, compulsory education, for a year. Apart from this, Seong Ji-woo could no longer squeeze out a little living expenses. Seong Xiaolin could only scrimp and save, waiting for her father to send new money every month. If it weren't for his wife, even if Seong Ji-woo gritted his teeth and ran back to the big city to clean the shoes of the big men in the nightclub, he would definitely do his best to cultivate his daughter. However, who knew that less than 2 days after Seong Xiaolin received the notice, his wife suddenly fell ill. After the results of the examination, Seong Ji-woo's hair turned white almost overnight. His black and white hair looked as if he had aged 20 years. Seong Ji-woo felt so worried that his head hurt. That night, the sensible Seong Xiaolin suddenly ran to her father and tore up the acceptance letter that she had worked so hard to get right in front of him. Although tearing up a middle school acceptance letter wasn't a big deal, Seong Xiaolin had already told her father clearly that she didn't have to go to school, but she had to save her mother. The other people in the village also heard the news about Seong Ji-woo. Most of the Miao family were kind-hearted people. They took out a few hundred yuan from their originally small savings and secretly gave it to Seong Ji-woo. Seong Ji-woo was so grateful that he cried. However, after all, everyone in the Miao village was poor. After all, it was far from enough to cover his wife's medical expenses. Seong Ji-woo saw that the deadline for the operation was approaching. His wife had often fainted from the pain, but he still couldn't raise enough money. His wife had asked Seong Ji-woo to give up many times. Although they had been together for more than 10 years, Seong Ji-woo and his wife lived a tight life. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were poor. However, the relationship between Seong Ji-woo and his wife was very good. They had helped each other in times of need for more than 10 years. How could Seong Ji-woo bear to see his wife suffer and leave him? In the end, Seong Ji-woo had no choice but to use the method of robbery. However, the first and last time he made a move, he encountered Poplar Fruit. When Poplar Fruit asked him to pay the compensation, Seong Ji-woo was already disheartened. His heart was crying. When he finally decided to walk up the cliff, he murmured to his wife in his heart, "Bai Nyo, Brother Seong is incompetent. I can't save you. I'll go down and wait for you." His idea was to use his death in exchange for Poplar Fruit's forgiveness, so that he could keep the last tuition fee that his family left for Xiaolin. He couldn't cure his wife's illness. Then, he would go down and accompany his wife to cross this bridge. Perhaps the regret in this life could only be repaid in the next life. For so many years, Seong Ji-woo had suffered a lot and suffered a lot of grievances, but he had never told anyone. Today, in front of Poplar Fruit, he completely exploded. His tears flowed, he danced, and he seemed to be crazy. However, every word and sentence came from the bottom of his heart. In the end, he was so hoarse that he couldn't make a sound. Unknowingly, Poplar Fruit held his daughter and listened to him for half an hour. Unknowingly, his eyes were filled with tears. Even Kiki, who didn't fully understand, sobbed softly. She couldn't control her emotions. Chapter 502. After Xiongju finished speaking, he fell into silence, and Poplar Fruit did not know how to comfort him. It was terribly quiet all around, and even the sound of Goldie's tail sweeping the leaves could be heard clearly. "Papa!" Kiki pulled the clothes in front of her father and called softly. Poplar Fruit looked down at his daughter and saw the sadness in Kiki's big watery eyes. Poplar Fruit gently touched Kiki's hair and heard her whisper pitifully in his ear, "Papa, Uncle is so pitiful." With a smile, Poplar Fruit immediately understood what Kiki meant. He gently kissed his daughter's tender forehead and comforted her. "Kiki, don't worry. Papa knows what to do. Don't be sad." Poplar Fruit walked over and gently pulled Xiongju up from the ground with his right hand. He smiled and said to Xiongju, "There will be a way. As long as you work hard, there will be a way." However, Poplar Fruit did not directly tell Xiongju his thoughts. He did not wait for Xiongju to ask and said another topic. "By the way, do you know where I could get a mobile phone signal nearby? I want to find someone to tow the car back for repair." Seeing that Xiongju's eyes began to worry again, Poplar Fruit patted him on the shoulder with a smile and said, "Don't worry, you don't have to pay for it. I bought insurance." Xiongju took Poplar Fruit to the mountain road 200 meters away. Poplar Fruit found a mobile phone signal with difficulty. This was enough. Poplar Fruit dialed the insurance company's number and asked them to find someone to tow the car back for repair. He did not know if Poplar Fruit had bought the highest level of insurance, but the insurance company arrived very quickly. Poplar Fruit did not wait for 40 minutes before the insurance company's people arrived at the scene with difficulty in two tow trucks. Poplar Fruit packed up his belongings and instructed the insurance company to tow his beloved car away. "Sir, do you want to go back with our car?" Not only did the insurance company not make things difficult for Poplar Fruit, but they also respectfully provided all the services they could provide to Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit did not know that his treatment was already rare in the world. He thought that all insurance companies treated him the same way. He silently gave the insurance company a thumbs up. However, he still refused. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "No need, we still have things to do." After the people from the insurance company left, Poplar Fruit turned to Xiongju, who had been silent, and said with a smile, "Let's go to your house." "To my house." Xiongju felt that he was already grateful that Poplar Fruit didn't find trouble with him. He didn't expect that Poplar Fruit would make such an unexpected request. Therefore, after hearing this, Xiongju asked in surprise. "Yes." Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "If we don't go to your house, how do I know if what you told me is true? Don't worry." Poplar Fruit saw that Xiongju was still in fear and trepidation. He patted Xiongju on the shoulder and said with a smile, "Just treat it as a home visit. If what you said is true, I might be able to help you a little." Xiongju was stunned. He couldn't believe his ears. He stood there stupidly for a while, and then his expression turned into ecstasy. Xiongju could see that Poplar Fruit was not a simple person from his car, dress, and belongings. Poplar Fruit said that he might be able to help a little. Then, there might be hope for his wife's illness. "Let's go. Don't stand there stupidly." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Do you have a car? The two of us can't handle so much luggage now." Although the souvenirs that Poplar Fruit bought along the way were directly sent home by express delivery, there was still a lot of luggage moved out of the car. They were piled up in the grass on the side of the road. At this time, Jinzi was still guarding the luggage loyally. "Car?" Xiongju was in a dilemma. He scratched his head and said, "The cattle at home have been sold. We don't have a car. I'm going to faint." Yangwen knew this would happen, so she asked the insurance company to move some things back. Now, it was impossible for the two of them to move all the things. "Why don't we hide some in the cave first? We can take them when we come back." Xiongju asked with some embarrassment. "Cave? Where's the cave?" Poplar Fruit asked curiously. Xiongju took Poplar Fruit for 200 meters in the mountain forest. He lay on the ground and touched left and right. He didn't know where he found a rope. He pulled it gently, and a woven wall that looked like a wall covered with creepers opened like a door. A dark cave suddenly appeared. "This is the cave that I found after a long time of searching," Xiongju said with some pride. Put the things inside, and no one will find it. Poplar Fruit looked around curiously and found that the cave was about 5 or 6 square meters, but it was covered with hay. Although it was a little dark, the environment was still okay. Poplar Fruit even saw traces of people living here. I have been living here for the past 2 days outside, Xiongju said with some embarrassment. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, everyone makes mistakes. Let's not talk about the past. When they returned to the original place, Poplar Fruit moved the mountain-like luggage back and forth twice. He only brought a school bag and a suitcase with him, which mainly contained some daily necessities and Kiki's things. Of course, Poplar Fruit also brought his and Kiki's sleeping bags. Looking at this, they were going to spend the night in Hmong Village. The environment was definitely not as good as a hotel, so maybe the sleeping bags would come in handy. Let me help you carry it. Xiongju limped over and insisted on helping Poplar Fruit carry the suitcase and 2 sleeping bags. However, it was inconvenient for him to carry so many things, so it was a little difficult. Poplar Fruit smiled and grabbed the heavy suitcase. He said, you don't have to do this. It's just a suitcase. I can still pull it. Don't think that it was easy to pull a suitcase. In fact, when they walked uphill on a mountain road, every meter they walked vertically would consume the same amount of energy. Xiongju looked at Poplar Fruit's relaxed manner and scratched his head in shame. He quickly carried the 2 light sleeping bags and walked in front of Poplar Fruit to lead the way. Kiki lay on her father's left shoulder. Sometimes she looked at Goldie, who was following them, and sometimes she kept looking at the surrounding environment. They had really entered a mountainous area, and when they reached the middle, the flat road had disappeared, leaving only a small path in the forest made by people and ox carts. Poplar Fruit finally understood what it meant to be in a mountainous area. After walking a few kilometers of mountain road, they still had to cross a long suspension bridge hanging high between 2 mountains, and this was only half of the journey. His hometown in the rural area of Guangdong Province was already a paradise. Chapter 503. After leaving the highway, Poplar Fruit followed Xiongju and walked for more than an hour on the mountain road before they arrived at the Hmong village where he was. It was not just a matter of time, but also the hardships of trekking through mountains and rivers. Those who had not experienced it could not imagine it, especially the hanging bridge in the middle, which was hundreds of meters high in the air. They might fall off the cliff if they took a wrong step. Poplar Fruit hugged Kiki tightly with one hand and pulled the iron chain with the other hand to walk over. Xiongju had to go back and forth 3 times to carry the luggage, while Gold was curled up in Poplar Fruit's school bag and did not dare to move. The Hmong village was hidden deep in the mountains. It was said that the Hmong people settled here to escape the war, but now it had become their shackles. On the one hand, it was their homeland, the foundation of their ancestors, which was impossible to give up. On the other hand, it was too remote and could not obtain the conditions to live in the modern world. The only thing that could connect the Hmong village with the modern world was that it had electricity and phones. Some of their relatives who worked outside brought back cheap functional phones. However, this place seemed to be decades behind. There was not even a TV, let alone a computer. Poplar Fruit followed Xiongju through the middle of the village and found that most of the people he could see were old people, women, and children. However, he felt relieved after thinking about it for a while. Xiongju had a good interpersonal relationship in the village. His neighbors greeted him again, and Poplar Fruit nodded to them with a smile. However, most of the Hmong people looked at him with strange and fresh eyes. Xiongju was worried that Poplar Fruit would feel uncomfortable, so he apologized to Poplar Fruit. There are very few outsiders here, so they look at you like that. Poplar Fruit smiled and waved his hand, indicating that he did not care. When they were about to reach his home, Xiongju's expression became eager. He kept looking into the distance, wanting to see the familiar figures of his family. Uncle Jiwu, have you found the money? At this time, Xiongju met an acquaintance from the same clan. It was his niece of the same age, but different generation. When she saw Xiongju coming back, she rushed to the window with the child in her arms and asked in a rough voice, "Not yet, but I may have met a benefactor. Maybe there is a way, Xiongju said without any sadness or joy. They were speaking in Miao language. Poplar Fruit had never learned it before, so of course, he couldn't understand. Let's do it, Dad. Xiongju's door suddenly opened, and a voice as clear as a lark's came out. Xiongju didn't know if that person had heard his voice. Poplar Fruit looked up and saw a small but beautiful my daughter jumping out of the door and pouncing on Xiongju with a worried look. The little girl looked like she was only 12 or 13 years old, but the burden of life had made her every move look like a mature little adult. This should be the most outstanding daughter in Xiongju's heart, Xiong Xiaolin. Xiongju went out this time and experienced a lot. When he saw his daughter, his tears almost burst out again. But in front of his daughter, he had to show a stable posture of being the family's pillar. Therefore, he just carried Poplar Fruit's sleeping bag, held his daughter's head with one hand, and then took a deep breath to calm his surging mood. Poplar Fruit saw deep affection in Xiongju's eyes. Although Xiongju didn't know how to express it, Poplar Fruit, who was also a father of a girl, knew that it was love. After waiting for a while with a smile, Yanghua saw that Xiongju turned his head and pulled his daughter to introduce her to them. Yanghua, this is my eldest daughter, Xiong Xiaolin, whom I told you about before. They learn each other's names on the way here. Xiaolin, this is Uncle Poplar Fruit. Quickly call him Uncle. At first, Xiong Xiaolin was a little vigilant when she saw Poplar Fruit. Although she was young, she knew a lot of things. She had seen too many families in her village or other nearby Miao villages that had to marry their daughters to others in exchange for rich betrothal gifts because their families were poor. But after hearing her father's introduction and seeing the little girl in Poplar Fruit's arms, she slowly let down her guard. But even so, Xiong Xiaolin was still a little shy. She leaned on her father's body, smiled shyly, and greeted Poplar Fruit. Hello, Xiaolin, this is Uncle's daughter, Kiki. Kiki, you should also call her sister. Poplar Fruit held Kiki's hand and smiled. Sister. Although Kiki was more shy than Xiong Xiaolin, in her father's arms, she always had more courage. However, when Poplar Fruit put her on the ground, she became timid again. She turned around, hugged her father's long legs, and looked at him timidly. Sister Kiki, hello. Xiong Xiaolin hesitated for a moment. Then she walked in front of Kiki and stretched out a hand in a friendly manner. Poplar Fruit saw that Xiong Xiaolin was wearing a thin but delicate silver bracelet on her wrist. This was probably the only jewelry from the Miao tribe that she had on her. Don't think that all the girls from the Miao tribe could be like on TV, with silver crowns, silver necklaces, shawls, necklaces, toothpicks, hairpins, earrings, bracelets, rings, and so on. When they walked out of the house, they would be dazzling. In the poor mountainous areas, not to mention jewelry, it was already very fortunate to have a beautiful embroidered pleated skirt. This was something that was only worn during festive occasions. Xiong Xiaolin's Mandarin was a little better than Xiongju's, but she still had a heavy accent. This was probably due to the education gap in remote areas. Seeing Xiong Xiaolin's sister's kindness, Kiki hesitated. She looked up at her father and saw him nodding at her with a smile. Kiki hesitantly stretched out a white and tender hand and placed it in Xiong Xiaolin's palm. However, she didn't dare to leave her father's side. Her other hand was still grabbing onto Poplar Fruit's trousers. Poplar Fruit smiled and squatted down again. He stretched his hand into the backpack behind him and gently pulled out the lazy dog gold that refused to come out. After gold came out, it shook its body and then ran to Kiki's side to please her. Only then did it look at the surrounding environment. Poplar Fruit's choice was correct. After gold ran out, Xiong Xiaolin and Kiki's attention was attracted to it. My daughters seemed to have a common topic and gradually began to chat with each other. Xiongju led Poplar Fruit and the others into their family's small wooden house. Xiongju's house was actually very big. The two-story wooden house added up to a few hundred square meters. However, the house here didn't have much value. Moreover, it seemed that this small wooden house was quite old. It was probably built by Xiongju's ancestors. After Poplar Fruit went in, Xiongju hurriedly asked Poplar Fruit to sit down and then brewed some oil tea for Poplar Fruit. However, Poplar Fruit could already see that Xiong Ji Wu was absent-minded. This man with a congenital disease was now completely worried about his bedridden wife. If it weren't for the fact that he had to entertain Poplar Fruit, he would have gone straight to the bedroom as soon as he entered the house. Chapter 504. Poplar Fruit could see the anxiety in Xiong Jiwu's heart, so he took the initiative to persuade him to visit his wife first. Xiong Jiwu hesitated for a moment, but he did not refuse. He turned around and went into the bedroom. Xiaolin. Poplar Fruit looked at Xiong Xiaolin, who was squatting and whispering to Kiki, who was touching Goldie's back, and called her with a smile. Xiong Xiaolin looked up at Poplar Fruit with a little shyness in her eyes. But now, apart from her father, she was the only one who could carry the family. So when she heard Poplar Fruit's call, she stood up timidly, but summoned up the courage to ask, "Uncle Poplar Fruit, do you want to drink water? I'll go and pour it for you now." Although Xiong Jiwu was born with a disability, and because of the pressure of life, he was dark and thin, he was quite good-looking. He was considered handsome in the Hmong village. Xiong Xiaolin, on the other hand, had inherited Xiong Jiwu's delicate and pretty facial features. Although she was young, she was like an orchid in the deep mountains. If not for the shabby clothes on her body, she would definitely be a little beauty. Poplar Fruit valued Xiong Xiaolin's eyes the most. It was not that they were beautiful, but it was really not easy to see the determination and unyielding light in a child's eyes. What made Poplar Fruit sigh even more was that this girl was a very smart child. Poplar Fruit did not see confusion in her eyes, but a maturity that did not belong to her age. "No, Uncle is not thirsty." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "I heard from your father that you were admitted to the best junior high school in the county. Can you tell Uncle why you don't want to go to school?" "Mom is sick, and I want to leave money for her treatment," Xiong Xiaolin said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Yangguo was very surprised. From Xiong Xiaolin's voice, he didn't hear any grievances, nor did he hear any dissatisfaction. Could it be that she really didn't want to give up her future? Then what do you want to do in the future? What if you don't study? Poplar Fruit asked. "I think I should go out to work." Xiong Xiaolin looked down at her toes and whispered, "My brother has to go to school, and my mother has to recuperate. I have to help my father make money." What a sensible child. Poplar Fruit was shocked. He hesitated for a moment and asked, "But you're only 12 or 13 years old. You're not old enough to work. They don't want child labor." "I'm already 14, almost 15. Xiong Xiaolin raised her head and looked at Poplar Fruit stubbornly. "Moreover, I'm tall. If you tell them that I'm an adult, they'll want me." Many brothers and sisters in the village went out early. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said, "Wait a minute, there are a lot of questions. Let's go through them one by one. You said you're almost 15 years old? How could this be? How come you just graduated from primary school when you're only 15? After a moment of silence, Xiong Xiaolin said, "I studied for 8 years in primary school." Poplar Fruit finally understood the reason behind this from Xiong Xiaolin's explanation. It turned out that the village was too far away from the nearby towns. It would take half a day to walk to the road outside. The people in the village did not have a car, and they were reluctant to spend money to take a bus. It would take at least a day to walk to the town. The children in the village were all poor. It was impossible for them to afford to send them to the primary school in the town. Therefore, their only hope of studying was in their own primary school in the Hmong village. Speaking of which, the village where the 5 families of Xiongji lived was the closest to the outside world. It was close to the mountains, so the town set up a primary school there and sent a few teachers to teach there. The children in the other villages even had to walk for 2 hours on the mountain road to go to school. Although there were only a few teachers, the village was too remote and difficult. Year after year, the number of teachers decreased. Those who had connections had left, and the teachers outside did not dare to come over after hearing about it. They came to the remote, mountainous area to teach. The salary was low, and they were not part of the normal teacher system. They could only be private teachers. It was extremely difficult to solve the problem. The village had reported to the last remaining teacher several times, but it was still not solved. Who would dare to come over? Therefore, Xiong Xiaolin studied for 8 years. The first 2 years were taught by 2 teachers. For the next 2 years, only the old teacher was left. In the next 2 years, the old teacher suffered from a serious liver disease, so he retired early and went back to the city to treat his illness. During these 2 years of recuperation, the primary school in the Hmong village no longer had any teachers. The primary school in the Hmong village was in a state of emptiness. All the children did not study and could only help their families. After 2 years, the village chief in the village felt that this was not a solution. He went to the city to find the old teacher to help him think of a solution. At that time, the retired old teacher was already a model worker in the county. For the sake of the Hmong village, he ran around the county and the city several times. However, there was still no news from the future teacher. This made the old teacher so worried that his hair turned white. In the end, the old teacher resolutely returned to the Hmong village and continued to teach the children. Unfortunately, after the new year, the old teacher taught for half a month before he passed away on the podium forever. On that day, white silk flowers bloomed all over the hillside. However, there was no sign of the gardener who was diligent in watering the flowers. After the old teacher left, Xiong Xiaolin, who had the best grades, continued to study with her younger brothers and sisters. A few of the children who took the primary school examination even got good results. This might be the best sacrifice for the old teacher. Hearing this, Poplar Fruit felt tears welling up in his eyes. On one hand, it was because of the old teacher who dedicated his life to educating the children in the remote mountainous area. On the other hand, it was because of these poor but strong children. Poplar Fruit and Kiki felt sad when they heard this. However, Xiong Xiaolin was very calm when she was talking about the old teacher's death. She was a little depressed. Poplar Fruit could guess that Xiong Xiaolin had experienced too many unequal lives and setbacks in life. What about the children in the village now? Are they still going to study? Poplar Fruit hesitated for a moment before he asked the question that he had already guessed the answer to. There's no more. Xiong Xiaolin shook her head. There's no teacher. The uncles and aunties have asked them to go back to help with the housework. Yes, without a teacher to teach them, the initial hope of the parents was also shattered. Instead of letting the children wander aimlessly, it was better for them to follow the old path of the adults, either farming or going out to work. Generation after generation, this was the fate of the farmers in the mountainous area. Very, very few could seize the opportunity and achieve success. Most people spent their lives working hard to make a living. Poplar Fruit fell into silence. Xiong Xiaolin hesitated for a moment. She reached out to Kiki, who was dressed like a little princess, and pulled her to the side to play. She did not want to disturb Poplar Fruit. However, she still did not know that Poplar Fruit might be the one who could change the course of their lives. Chapter 505. After arriving at the Hmong village, Poplar Fruit was basically sure that Xiong Jiwu was not lying to him. Then, he followed Xiong Jiwu to visit his wife. Seeing the emaciated woman lying on the bed, Poplar Fruit sighed and thought to himself, too miserable. Xiong Jiwu's wife was called Yi Nuzang. She was also from a Hmong tribe, but from another Hmong village. If it weren't for the fact that she was weak and sick, her family wouldn't have agreed to let her marry the disabled Xiong Jiwu. Yi Nuzang was originally petite. Now that she was sick, she had been tortured to the point where she didn't look like a human anymore. Seeing that her hand was so thin that it looked like there were only bones left, Poplar Fruit felt sad. Sister-in-law, don't move. Just lie down, Poplar Fruit said quickly. He also signaled Xiong Jiwu to hold down the weak Yi Nuzang. In front of Yi Nuzang and Xiong Jiwu's family, Poplar Fruit just chatted a little. When he talked about his origin, Poplar Fruit said with a smile, I was originally a tourist. I brought my daughter here to play, but I accidentally got lost in the mountains. It was Brother Xiong who found me and brought me out. Xiong Jiwu looked at Poplar Fruit gratefully. He didn't expect that Poplar Fruit would still care about his family's feelings after he had offended Poplar Fruit by robbing him. He was really too kind. Because the sun was about to set, Poplar Fruit came out with Xiong Jiwu and said to him, Brother Xiong, sister-in-law's condition is not very good. I don't think we can endure it anymore. Tomorrow, you and I will take sister-in-law out of the mountain to treat her illness." Seeing that Xiongju wanted to say something but stopped, Poplar Fruit patted him on the shoulder with a smile and said, "Don't worry, I will pay for all the expenses." Xiongju took Poplar Fruit's hand and was so grateful that he didn't know what to say. He choked and almost cried again. Dad, what's wrong with you?" When Xiong Xiaolin saw Xiongju's appearance, she ran over worriedly and asked while pulling Xiongju's clothes. "It's okay. Daddy is happy." Xiongju rubbed the corners of his eyes, put his big hand on his daughter's head, and said with a smile, "Your mother's illness can be cured. Your Uncle Poplar Fruit said that he would take your mother to see a doctor tomorrow. Don't worry about money." Poplar Fruit patted Xiong Xiaolin's shoulder with a smile and said, "Uncle Poplar Fruit promises to give you a healthy mother. Also, hurry up and get the tour notice back." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "When school starts next month, you have to be obedient and study. You know, your father is counting on you." "But what about my brother?" Xiong Xiaolin thought that if she went out to study, there would be no one to take care of her brother at home. Her younger brother had just returned from playing outside. Compared to Xiong Xiaolin, Xiong Xiaofeng was much more shy and had been hiding at the side. Xiong Xiaofeng was also in the 3rd grade of primary school this year. His grades were very average. Without a teacher, his studies were very problematic. "We will think of a way later." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "The solution is thought of by people. I don't believe that the country can't solve the academic problems of so many children. In fact, the country really couldn't solve it. Otherwise, the old teacher wouldn't have hit so many walls. As for the teachers in the border areas, they had all gone to the northwestern areas like Tibet. Like the mountainous areas of Guishan province, there were no policies and no funds. The local government didn't even care about getting rid of the poverty label, so how could they have the time to care about them?" In the evening, Poplar Fruit and Kiki stayed at the Xiong family's house. Because they heard that there was a handsome Han man outside, many people in Among village came to greet him warmly, so Poplar Fruit couldn't stop eating. The people in Among village brought some delicious fruits over, but the food in the Xiong family's house was still very simple, even though Xiongju also rummaged through the cabinets to look for ingredients. Poplar Fruit could understand the situation very well. The Xiong family and the entire Among village were very poor, so he didn't expect to be able to have a big meal here. "Don't bother. You can keep the chicken. When sister-in-law comes back from her treatment, you can give it to her to nourish her body." Poplar Fruit smiled and stopped Xiongju, who was about to kill the old hen at home, and said, "Just eat something simple." After dinner, Poplar Fruit missed Fong Bei, so he took his mobile phone to the balcony and called her. "Uncle, have you arrived in Chong City?" Fong Bei asked with a smile when she picked up the phone. She knew that Poplar Fruit had gone the wrong way 2 days ago. "Hey, don't mention it. We have to stay in the mountains for a night." Poplar Fruit laughed. What's wrong? Did something happen? Did you lose your way again?" Fong Bei checked the map. The place where Poplar Fruit and Kiki stayed yesterday was at most half a day's drive away from Chong City. "How could it be so late? I didn't lose my way." Poplar Fruit smiled. He turned his head and saw that no one was listening to him on the phone. Then he told Fong Bei about the twists and turns of today's experience. "Road robber? Did you get into a car accident?" Hearing that Poplar Fruit was in a car accident because of Xiongju, Fong Bei was very nervous. Her voice rose an octave. "Are you hurt?" Fong Bei breathed a sigh of relief when she heard that Poplar Fruit, Kiki, and Goldie were all fine. As for the poor Land Rover, Fong Bei didn't care about it all. Then, after listening to Poplar Fruit tell the story of the Xiong family, the kind-hearted Fong Bei burst into tears. "Uncle, they're so pitiful. You must help them." "Don't cry." Poplar Fruit heard Fong Bei crying. He felt bad and said quickly, "I did help them. I just said that I would take them to see a doctor tomorrow." "Do you have enough money?" "I have a lot here. Do you want me to give them all to you?" Fong Bei said on the phone. Poplar Fruit laughed and scolded her lovingly. "Silly, how can I not have money? I have enough. Don't worry. It's not a terminal illness. It won't cost much. I heard from Xiong Jiwu that if it's treated in time, it won't be a big problem. And you also have to be careful. You just said that you must hold the suspension bridge well. Don't try to be brave. Fong Bei was still worried. Because Fong Bei still had to review, Poplar Fruit hung up the phone very early. However, Fong Bei's concern made Poplar Fruit feel energized. Until he entered the house, the corner of his mouth could not help but curl up. He was in a wonderful mood. Back in the house, Poplar Fruit saw that Kiki was still chatting with Xiong Xiaolin. What are you talking about? Poplar Fruit sat down with a smile and asked, Papa, Sister Xiaolin taught me how to speak Meow language. Kiki ran over and held Poplar Fruit's hand and happily said, Oh, is that so? Then what Meow language did Kiki learn? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. Kiki learned a lot. Kiki waved her little hand and excitedly gestured. Oh no, it's Papa's idea. And Xiaolin Yagua. Kiki learns very fast. Xiong Xiaolin sat sideways on the ground and said with some embarrassment, Chapter 506. The next morning, Poplar Fruit woke up very early. However, because it was a relatively unfamiliar environment, Poplar Fruit did not go outside to practice martial arts. Instead, he climbed out of his sleeping bag and went to the balcony to look at the misty mountains and breathe in the fresh morning air. The first one to wake up in the Xiong family was not Xiong Jiwu, who Poplar Fruit thought, but the young Xiong siblings. Xiong Xiaofeng was dragged out of the warm bed by his sister. He rubbed his face with the cold stream water in a daze, then picked up a textbook and read with his sister. At first, Xiong Xiaofeng followed Xiong Xiaolin as she read a sentence. Poplar Fruit stood on the balcony on the second floor and listened carefully for a while. He heard Xiong Xiaofeng's impatience. However, Xiong Xiaolin was still very prestigious in front of her brother. She grabbed Xiong Xiaofeng's collar and pressed him on the stool. Xiong Xiaofeng had to read obediently. After reading for more than half an hour, Xiong Jiwu woke up and began to chop wood and boil water. At this time, Xiong Xiaofeng could not sit still. He used the excuse that he was going to help his father and escape from his sister's control. Poplar Fruit did not understand the Meow language, but according to the few words he learned yesterday, Poplar Fruit could roughly judge that Xiong Xiaofeng was going to be lazy. Poplar Fruit stood on the balcony on the second floor and smiled at the happy time of the family. The Xiong siblings downstairs did not notice that Poplar Fruit had woken up. After Xiong Xiaofeng ran away, Xiong Xiaolin took out an English textbook from the old but clean green canvas bag next to her and began to read. The education level of the children in the mountains was certainly not as good as that of the children in the city. For example, in Yangcheng, where Poplar Fruit lived, the children had already participated in various English cram schools before going to school. Their English was very fluent. In the mountains, their English textbooks were only available in the 5th grade. Even so, many people did not know if they had the opportunity to learn a few words of English when they graduated from primary school. In this regard, the education of the children in the mountain areas was far behind. After listening for a while, Yang's eyebrows knitted together. He did not care much about other subjects, but English was Poplar Fruit's specialty. Poplar Fruit's ears were extremely picky when it came to English. Your pronunciation isn't accurate. Poplar Fruit gave Xiong Xiaolin's English pronunciation a big cross in his heart. How did your teacher teach you in the past? You can pronounce voiceless consonants as voice consonants? However, thinking of the old teacher's story, Poplar Fruit fell silent again. It was already very difficult for the elderly to teach him a few sentences of English. Although there were not that many subjects in primary school, would an elderly person be able to handle teaching Chinese, mathematics, and English? That being said, Poplar Fruit could understand the old teacher's difficulties, but he could not tolerate Xiong Xiaolin's strange accent. He ran down the stairs. Uncle Poplar Fruit, you're awake? When Xiong Xiaolin saw Poplar Fruit come down, she quickly stood up from the small bench. She closed the textbook, but did not know where to put her hands. Poplar Fruit waved his hand and smiled. I've been awake for a long time. You don't have to stand up. Continue reading. Uncle came down to teach you how to read English. Really? Xiong Xiaolin's eyes flashed with surprise. She did not know that Poplar Fruit's English was already at the level of a professor, but she knew that the people from the city must be very good. Poplar Fruit did not want to talk nonsense with her. He went straight to the point and said, "There's a problem with your pronunciation. Let's start from the phonetic transcription." After switching to teacher mode, Yang's entire body exuded a kind of captivating charm, as well as an irresistible majesty. Xiong Jiwu heard the noise and poked his head out of the kitchen. He originally wanted to say hello to Poplar Fruit, but when he saw Poplar Fruit's appearance, Xiong Jiwu shrank his head and swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. If Poplar Fruit was said to be the most teacher-like teacher, then Xiong Xiaolin was the best student. She also quickly entered into a learning mode. While listening attentively to Poplar Fruit's teachings, she also practiced the most basic phonetic transcription earnestly. No, there's a tongue here. Your tongue should press against the roof of your mouth and then break out the sound. Poplar Fruit was still dissatisfied and interrupted Xiong Xiaolin again. Xiong Xiaolin's enthusiasm for learning was very good, but her talent in learning English was still a little lacking. Her tongue was very stiff like a beginner's. She could often remember how to pronounce the words, but her tongue could not keep up with her consciousness. Poplar Fruit was a little anxious for her. However, after teaching for a while, Poplar Fruit figured it out by himself. It turned out that he was too anxious for success. For Xiong Xiaolin, her English did not have a solid foundation like the children in the city. It was really not easy for her to learn it well in a short period of time. Xiong Xiaolin knew that she had disappointed Uncle Poplar Fruit. She bit her lower lip and tried hard to correct her mistake. Although her progress was very slow, Poplar Fruit saw another advantage of Xiong Xiaolin. Diligence could make up for stupidity. When she was taught by Poplar Fruit, she carefully recorded every word that Poplar Fruit said. When she practiced, she was also very serious. No matter how slow she learned, Poplar Fruit firmly believed that she would be able to learn successfully. After teaching for half an hour, Poplar Fruit went upstairs to wake Kiki up. Kiki, who was wrapped in a fluffy little coat, sat next to her in a daze and listened to her father teach Sister Xiaolin. After talking about some basics, Poplar Fruit began to teach Xiong Xiaolin how to use specific words to practice pronunciation. At this point, Kiki began to feel that it was familiar because she knew some of the words. Apple. Kiki really likes apples. Kiki suddenly danced with joy and suddenly said such a sentence. Little sister Kiki is so amazing. Xiong Xiaolin looked at Kiki enviously. She had just been called Granny and was scolded by Poplar Fruit. She didn't expect that a child who was much younger than her could pronounce better than her. Were all the children in the city so good? Then what was the point of learning? It seemed like she couldn't catch up at all. Xiong Xiaolin fell into a state of disappointment and helplessness. Poplar Fruit looked at her appearance and sighed softly in his heart. He said, "Xiaolin, don't be discouraged. As long as you continue to work hard, you will definitely be able to pronounce it well." Poplar Fruit told Xiong Xiaolin his own story. When he was studying in the city's high school, he also found that the other city students in his class were very mature and knew a lot of things. However, after 3 years of hard work, the gap between him and the city students was almost closed. Xiong Xiaolin looked at Poplar Fruit with some admiration and clenched her fist hard. She was reinvigorated by Poplar Fruit's story. Poplar Fruit's uncle, who came from the countryside, could achieve such great success. If she worked harder, she would definitely be able to do it. This experience was real. Poplar Fruit didn't lie through his teeth, but Poplar Fruit hid a fact. The gap between him and the city's children was far smaller than the gap between Xiong Xiaolin and the city's children. After all, Guangdong province was a more economically developed area. Even in the countryside, people knew more about the outside world than in the mountainous areas. Naturally, the education level wouldn't be too far off. Chapter 507. Before breakfast was ready, Poplar Fruit gave Xiong Xiaolin a basic English lesson. In fact, Poplar Fruit himself was a little surprised that he could teach this boring knowledge of phonetic symbols. If it was 5 years ago, when Poplar Fruit was still in college and had a lot of part-time tutoring. Poplar Fruit would never reach the level of interesting. Although Chi-Chi had been fooling around the entire time, Xiong Xiaolin was completely engrossed in the story. In the end, she kept her head down as she listened and took notes at the same time. Chi-Chi didn't even react when she poked her waist from behind. The most powerful evidence was that Xiong Xiaofeng, who had slipped into the kitchen to slack off, slowly moved back and joined them without blinking. Poplar Fruit's rich knowledge reserve and sensitive thinking were the reasons why he had made great progress in his attempt to be a teacher again. Although he didn't dare to say that a lesson could bring about tremendous progress for Xiong Xiaolin, Poplar Fruit felt that Xiong Xiaolin and the others listened with great interest, which was a great sense of accomplishment. Breakfast was very thin rice porridge with a few weed-like vegetables floating on top. Xiong Jiwu had already sprinkled some soybean oil in it, but it still didn't look appetizing. Even Poplar Fruit, who also came from the countryside, felt that the porridge was too shabby. But the Xiong family couldn't come up with anything better to entertain Poplar Fruit. Seeing that Poplar Fruit was a little hesitant, Xiong Jiwu looked at Poplar Fruit apologetically. Poplar Fruit laughed and waved at him, then picked up a bowl of porridge and took a sip. It was true that the porridge without the smell of meat didn't taste good, but the vegetables still fully embellished the taste of the porridge. The strong taste of the vegetables was a highlight. After Kiki drank a mouthful, she was unwilling to open her mouth to drink a second mouthful. Poplar Fruit had no choice but to take out a small can of milk powder that he carried with him and mixed it with hot water for her to drink. Seeing the Xiong siblings' curious and longing eyes, Poplar Fruit also made a big bowl for each of them. Because he didn't know if Yi Nuzhang's illness could stand the milk, and Xiong Jiwu also brought the porridge back to the house, Xiong Jiwu didn't make the third bowl of Poplar Fruit. Looking back, Xiong Xiaofeng had already greedily finished his big bowl of milk in big gulps. He had never tasted the fragrance of milk before. There were no cows in the mountains. It floated in his stomach and mind. He drank too fast and couldn't help burping, but this feeling was really memorable. Xiong Xiaofeng licked his lips and couldn't help but look at his sister. Xiong Xiaolin couldn't bear to drink it too quickly. She tasted it in small mouthfuls, as if each mouthful was the last one in her life. She wanted to remember the taste of the milk forever. Xiong Xiaolin quickly felt her brother's gaze. At this time, she only drank a little more than half a bowl of milk. Xiong Xiaolin raised her head and looked at her brother's longing eyes. Her heart was also struggling. In the end, Xiong Xiaolin reluctantly pushed the milk in her arms in front of her brother and whispered, "I'm full. You drink it." Xiong Xiaofeng hesitated for a moment, but his gluttonous nature finally prevailed. He held up the milk that his sister gave him. This time, he didn't drink it in such a hurry. As if he was learning from his sister, he drank it in small mouthfuls. Xiong Xiaolin secretly pulled over the big bowl that her brother drank from before. Seeing that there were still a few drops of milk left in it, she picked it up, raised her head, and drank the dripping milk. In the end, she reluctantly licked the big bowl. Her delicate tongue stretched out and curled back like a cute little wild cat. When Xiong Xiaolin put down the bowl, she remembered that Poplar Fruit and the rest were still sitting next to her. She turned her head and saw Poplar Fruit and Kiki looking at her in shock. Xiong Xiaolin's face immediately turned red. She embarrassedly put down the bowl and hung her head in front of her chest. She didn't dare to look into Poplar Fruit's eyes anymore. Although he didn't understand what Xiong Xiaolin meant when she handed her milk to her brother, Poplar Fruit was still touched by Xiong Xiaolin's modesty. Actually, Poplar Fruit could have made another bowl of milk for Xiong Xiaolin. If they were in the city, Poplar Fruit would have done so. However, this time, Poplar Fruit didn't bring much mill powder to the Hmong stockade. The rest was left in the cave. Poplar Fruit had to use it sparingly. From the looks of it, Kiki's rations would have to depend on this small bottle of milk powder. After dinner, Poplar Fruit received a call from his teacher, Chen Zongdai. Chen Zongdai had already arrived in Cheng City the day before yesterday. He was impatiently waiting for him. "Teacher, I still need 2 more days to go." Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said to Chen Zongdai. He planned to take Yi Nuzhang out of the mountain with Xiong Jiwu today to see a doctor. It would take at least 2 days to arrange for her hospitalization and surgery. What's going on? Aren't you already in Chong City? Chun Zongdai scolded furiously. The meeting is about to start. Where are you going? Poplar Fruit calculated the schedule that his teacher gave him and was shocked. There was a banquet before the meeting tomorrow night. The meeting would start the day after tomorrow. He actually forgot about it. However, Poplar Fruit didn't want to break his promise. He didn't arrange everything for Xiong Xiaolan's mother. Poplar Fruit felt really bad. After telling Chun Zongdai about this, Chun Zongdai was silent for a while. He said slowly, "What you did was right. A person should have a loving heart. If it were me, I would also help." Yes. The main thing is that her illness can't be delayed any longer. If it is delayed, her life will really be in danger. Poplar Fruit said worriedly. And it's like this. Chun Zongdai said firmly. You bring her to Chong City today. I will ask my old classmates at Chong City University to arrange a hospital for you. The medical conditions in Chong City will definitely be better than in your small county. If she comes to Chong City, you won't have to worry about delaying the meeting. Really? Poplar Fruit asked happily. It wasn't that he didn't think of bringing Yi Nuzang to a big city to see a doctor, but the problem was that he didn't know anyone in Guishan province. It would be difficult to make arrangements. Why didn't he think of having such a powerful teacher? Chun Zongdai was indeed well-connected. He had a high academic status in the country. He was the leader of the Functional Linguistics Association. He had been studying for 40 years and had students all over the world. If it weren't for his personality, which was only suitable for research institutes, how could Chun Zongdai still be a small director? Chun Zongdai didn't waste time with him. He said, "Okay, don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and send her to Chong City. I will arrange it for you now." Okay. Poplar Fruit happily put down the phone and waved his fist happily. There was always a way out. It was true. Back in the lobby, Poplar Fruit saw Xiong Xiaolan playing a girl's favorite game with Kiki. Kiki's bell-like laughter filled the entire Meow family's small wooden house. Seeing Kiki's happy face, Poplar Fruit smiled knowingly. All right. Poplar Fruit suddenly looked at Xiong Xiaolan with shining eyes. He had an idea in his mind. Chapter 508. He called Xiong Zhiwu, who had been worried and restless for a long time, over. Poplar Fruit looked at Xiong Zhiwu's expectant and worried expression. He smiled and said, "Brother Xiong, let's pack up now and leave the mountain as soon as possible." "Oh, okay. Xiong Zhiwu rubbed his hands on his body and quickly replied, "I have a proposal now." Poplar Fruit pulled him and said, "You two go to Chong City with me. I'll find someone to arrange for sister-in-law to be treated in a big hospital in Chong City. What do you think?" Chong City? Xiong Zhiwu opened his mouth. In his mind, Chong City, a huge municipality, could be said to be an unattainable existence. He hesitated and said, that will cost a lot of money." Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "Brother Xiong, don't worry about money. I'll pay for the expenses of going to Chong City. Moreover, you know that the sooner sister-in-law's illness is treated, the better. The medical level in Chong City is definitely better than in the county. After the operation, sister-in-law can recover earlier. Isn't this less painful?" Xiong Zhiwu was moved. He rubbed his hands hard and stammered, "Poplar Fruit, Brother Yang, I don't know how to thank you." Poplar Fruit patted him on the shoulder and smiled slightly. "You don't have to thank me. As long as you live a good life and take good care of your 2 children in the future, it will be fine." Yes. Xiong Zhiwu nodded. He turned his head and found that Xiong Xiaolan and Xiong Xiaofeng were not in the mood to play. The 2 children were looking at him and Poplar Fruit eagerly. Last night, Xiong Zhu secretly told them about this matter. Xiong Xiaolan and Xiong Xiaofeng, who had been thinking about their mother's illness, had been looking forward to Poplar Fruit's late arrangement for a long time. Xiaolan, Xiong Zhu reached out and pulled Xiong Xiaolan over. He gently patted his daughter's headscarf and said, "You heard it. Dad is going to take Mom out to treat her illness. It may take a few days before we come back. During this time, you have to help Dad take care of your brother at home. Okay?" Xiong Xiaolan nodded with reddened eyes. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "No need. Xiaolan, You have to come with us to see the world. Ah. This time, Xiong Jiwu and Xiong Xiaolin both looked at Poplar Fruit in surprise. Xiong Xiaofeng muttered in a low voice, "Uncle, I also want to go to the big city to take a look." These were his heartfelt words. Xiong Xiaofeng was 8 years old this year, but he had never taken a step out of this mountain. When Poplar Fruit told his father about going Qicheng, his heart had already drifted to the big city that he had never seen before. She heard that there were big buses there, and that the buildings were taller than the mountains. She also heard that the brothers and sisters there had beautiful clothes to wear. Don't interrupt. Xiong Jiwu glared at his youngest son, who had a bad temper. However, Poplar Fruit stopped him and said with a smile, "Little Foam, of course you're going to. Otherwise, if you're the only one at home, who will cook for you?" Then Poplar Fruit said to Xiong Jiwu with a smile, "Brother Xiong, don't worry. Take them with you. I'll pay for all the expenses." Poplar Fruit, the expenses are too high. Xiong Jiwu shook his head and said, "2 more children means 2 more mouths to feed." Poplar Fruit said with a smile, "It's okay. It won't cost much. By the way, you don't know what I do you?" Poplar Fruit suddenly asked. Kiki knows. Kiki, who had been unable to get a word in, jumped up happily and said, "Papa is a teacher." "I'm not a teacher yet." Poplar Fruit smiled modestly and said, "I'm now a graduate student and also an interpreter." What was a graduate student? What was a translator? Xiong Jiwu nodded confusedly, but he and the 2 children didn't understand at all. Poplar Fruit knew as soon as he saw their expressions, so he had to briefly introduce them to Xiong Jiwu and the others. Oh, a college student in university. Although 1 grade higher, he was still a college student. Xiong Jiwu and the others looked at Poplar Fruit with awe. The old teacher who used to teach in the stronghold was only a high school graduate, but he was already respected by everyone. A college student was even more amazing. Actually, it's not as high as you think. If Xiaolin studies hard, she can also be admitted to a university in the future. Poplar Fruit smiled and encouraged Xiong Xiaolin. "I'm going to Chong City this time, mainly to have a meeting with my teacher." Poplar Fruit said simply, "Xiaolin will accompany us and stay with us in the school's guest house. If there are no rooms, I'll book a hotel. I mainly want Xiaolin to help me take care of Kiki. If it were some other small activities, it would be fine for Poplar Fruit to bring Kiki to play. But this time, they were going to attend a seminar. The guests present were either highly respected or knowledgeable. In any case, they were all seniors in the translation field. It would be rude for Poplar Fruit to bring his daughter along. Poplar Fruit had a headache about this problem. His initial plan was to entrust Kiki to the other teachers from school, but they might not be free, and Kiki didn't like to stay with strangers. Although Kiki was a little more sensible now and didn't insist that her father stay by her side, if she couldn't see her father and didn't have acquaintances like Bebe or Uncle Mosquito by her side, her temper would explode. Seeing that Kiki was getting along well with the mature and steady Xiong Xiaolin, Poplar Fruit had an idea. That was why he wanted to bring Xiong Xiaolin to Chong City. "Sorry, my idea may be a little selfish." Poplar Fruit smiled apologetically and said, "But I think this is a good opportunity for you, Xiaolin. You can see the study and life of a university student. I think that after you experience it, you will have a clearer understanding of your own life." "Brother Yang, what do you mean?" Xiong Jiwu rubbed his hands and said embarrassedly, "You have helped our family so much. Xiaolin should help take care of the child. This is what she should do." Xiong Xiaolin nodded vigorously. After listening to what Poplar Fruit said, her eyes shone with desire. Xiong Xiaofeng, who didn't have much of a presence, squeezed in front of his sister and said with his chest out, "Uncle Poplar Fruit, there's still me. I can also help you take care of Sister Kiki. Who needs you to take care of her?" Kiki rejected him crisply. Uncle Mosquito said that girls should keep a distance from boys. As soon as these words came out, there was an awkward silence. Poplar Fruit's forehead dripped with cold sweat. He gritted his teeth at Song Jiwen, who was hiding in Yangcheng. He wanted nothing more than to grab him and beat him up. This bastard. He had led his daughter astray again. But then again, Why did Kiki's arrogant tone sound so much like little chilly Chinanlin? TSK, TSK. These two guys aren't good people. Chapter 509. The mountain road was long, and it would take a long time to walk. Poplar Fruit and the others didn't dare to delay for too long, so they quickly packed their luggage and set off. In addition to carrying Kiki in his left hand, Poplar Fruit also took care of all the luggage for the two families. Xiong Xiaofeng was too young, so he could only follow his sister empty-handed. Xiong Xiaolin carried a small basket, but under the care of Poplar Fruit, there wasn't much stuff in it. Yi Nuzhang couldn't walk too far on a mountain road because of her weak body, so Xiong Zhuwu asked his relatives in the stockade to help carry Yi Nuzhang out on a stretcher. Needless to say, the process was difficult. The rugged mountain road and the danger of the suspension bridge seriously restricted Poplar Fruit and the others' footsteps. They set off at 9 o'clock in the morning and walked until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when Poplar Fruit and the others arrived at the place where Poplar Fruit had crashed. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit had already expected this situation. Before he set off, he called the insurance company and asked them to help arrange a van to pick them up. The treatment of a big client was really different. Poplar Fruit's request was actually readily accepted by the insurance company. Of course, the fare was still paid by Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit and Xiong Zhuwu moved all the luggage out of the cave and into the van. Then they all sat in the van. Naturally, the van couldn't be compared with Poplar Fruit's Land Rover. Including the driver, there were a total of 4 adults and 3 children in the van. Plus the luggage in the back, it suddenly became a little crowded. Moreover, the van was very bumpy on the mountain road. Poplar Fruit was a little worried that Yi Nuzhang couldn't stand it. Xiong Zhuwu was very satisfied with such treatment. He used to walk the mountain road for a whole day on foot to go home or go out of the mountain. He didn't have the enjoyment of sitting in a van. However, for Poplar Fruit and Kiki, the van wasn't enjoyment. In the small, airtight space, he hugged Kiki and squeezed with Xiong Xiaolin and Xiong Xiaofeng. The strange smell of leather in the car became even worse. After sitting in the van for an hour, Poplar Fruit and the others arrived at the county. Poplar Fruit immediately made the decision to switch cars. After dinner, they switched to the bus that would go straight to Zhongqing. Although it wasn't much better, at least it was more spacious and comfortable. The bus ride to Chong City took 8 hours because the first part of the road wasn't fast. They took a nap. When they reached Great City, the sky was still shrouded in darkness. The Xiong family members, who were used to waking up early, wiped their faces and jumped out of the car energetically. However, it wasn't even 5 in the morning, and the city was still asleep. Walking out of the station, the street lamps were shrouded in fog. The dim light of the street lamps did not extend too far on the quiet street. The shops along the street were closed, and even the breakfast shops were locked. Other than the same batch of passengers who had just alighted, there were a few scattered taxis on the other side of the street. Poplar Fruit couldn't see any signs of human habitation. However, all this didn't stop Xiong Xiaofeng from sighing. What a big road! Xiong Xiaofeng was so excited that he couldn't fall asleep that night. When they arrived at Great City, although his eyelids were fighting, he forced himself to stay awake. He ran and skipped to the front, looking up and down at the city that was as huge as a prehistoric beast. His sister, Xiong Xiaolin, had never been to a big city before, but she didn't run around making a fuss. Instead, she was very sensible and helped her father support her mother. Although her thin shoulders couldn't support the entire Xiong family, her maturity and understanding touched Poplar Fruit. As they had arrived too early, it wasn't convenient for Poplar Fruit to ask the teacher to wake up from her sleep to fetch him. He carried Kiki, who was still sleeping on his chest, to the street and called for 2 taxis. Although it was still too early, Poplar Fruit, Kiki, and the 2 children sat in one car, while Xiong Zhuwu and Yi Nuzhang sat in the other car, following behind. The bus station was still very far from the university town where the meeting was held. Although there were no obstructions along the way, the taxi still took almost an hour to reach the university town. Xiong Xiaofeng couldn't hold on in the car anymore. He staggered and finally fell asleep on his sister's lap. It was a pity that he missed the most beautiful scenery in the city. Poplar Fruit's taxi passed through half of the city, and the sky gradually brightened from the misty darkness. The largest city in the southwest region was like a cloud leopard that had been sleeping for a long time, slowly opening its eyes. The tall buildings that were previously hidden in the fog revealed themselves. Poplar Fruit glanced at Xiong Xiaolin, who was staring blankly out of the car window. He smiled slightly and said in a low voice, "The world is very big, but people's dreams are even bigger." Xiong Xiaolin turned her head and looked into Poplar Fruit's eyes. She nodded thoughtfully. Once people got older, they wouldn't be able to sleep well, especially when they still had some worries in their hearts. Poplar Fruit didn't dare to call Chen Zhongdai. Chen Zhongdai, who had woken up early, couldn't help but call him. "Poplar Fruit, have you arrived yet? What took you so long?" "I'm here." Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said, "I thought you were still resting, so I didn't dare to disturb you." "Where are you now?" "I'll get someone to pick you up," Chen Zhongdai said, overjoyed at the unexpected good news. "I'm at the entrance of Chongchang University's campus," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. The old man walked out of the guest house excitedly and found Poplar Fruit at the bus stop in front of the school gate. When he saw Poplar Fruit, Chen Zhongdai almost couldn't recognize Poplar Fruit. After a day of mountain roads and driving, Poplar Fruit's hair was messy and his clothes were dirty. Moreover, he sat on a bench at the bus stop with the 4 members of the Xiong family. Bags of various sizes were placed around him, and he looked like a migrant worker who had just entered the city. "How did you end up like this? Where are your clothes?" Chen Zhongdai walked over and complained. Poplar Fruit knew what the teacher was referring to. He said with a smile, "It was an emergency, so I didn't have time to change. It's okay. The formal clothes are in the box, and I can change them later." After introducing the Xiong family to the teacher, Xiong Zhu and the others behaved more respectfully in front of Chen Zhongdai, an old professor. They kept bowing to Chen Zhongdai, which made Chen Zhongdai a little embarrassed. "I heard Poplar Fruit talk about your situation." Chen Zhongdai looked at Xiong Jiwu kindly and said, "Don't worry too much. The hospital has been arranged. The major third affiliated hospital is in the university town. Put down your things later, and I'll get someone to take you there. After the examination, the treatment will be arranged immediately." Xiong Jiwu thanked him repeatedly with red eyes. From yesterday to now, Xiong Jiwu felt like he was in a dream. He never thought that he would meet so many kind people. This made him feel even more guilty about the wrong things he had done in a moment of confusion. "It must be the blessing of my ancestors," Xiong Jiwu said in his heart. "Jiwu will repay the kindness of my benefactors in the future, even if I have to be an ox or a horse." Chapter 510. When they checked into the guest house of Chongqing University, there was a small setback. Perhaps it was because she saw that the 4 members of the Xiong family were in ragged clothes, but the girl at the front desk insisted that the rooms in the guest house had been arranged for the professors who came to the meeting. Even Poplar Fruit, who had not yet obtained the participation certificate, was not able to get the key to his room. Xiong Jiwu knew that he was not very popular with the people in the city, so he quietly pulled Poplar Fruit's clothes from behind and said in a low voice, "Poplar Fruit, it's okay. Xiao Yi is in the hospital, so I can find a place to stay. The weather is not cold." Before Poplar Fruit could speak, Chen Zhongdai lost his temper and said angrily, "Who said that there are no rooms? There are 5 or 6 empty rooms on the floor where I live. Why can't they be given to us?" Chen Zhongdai's every movement had a kind of magnanimity, and after he got angry, his momentum soared, making the girl at the front desk keep quiet. "Isn't it just a few rooms for you? Do you have to reject me so much?" Chen Zhongdai slammed the table and said, "Did the country train you to look down on farmers? But there are rules." The girl at the front desk hid behind the table and said weakly, "And you have a dog. So what if it's a dog? Can't a dog stay in the guest house? Rules are made by people. Why are you guys so stubborn?" Chen Zhongdai said resentfully, Forget it. I'll go up and call your leader over." Originally, Chen Zhongdai did not want to give the impression that he was bullying others, but he could not reason with them. He was impatient to waste time with them. President Chun, President Chun. Suddenly, there were a few hurried calls in the lobby. Everyone turned around and saw a middle-aged fat man in a work suit running out of the inner room in a hurry. When he saw the person, Chun Zongdai's face relaxed a little. He stopped and responded faintly, "Manager's song." The quarrel in the lobby not only woke up Kiki in a daze, but also woke up the lazy manager who was sleeping in the inner room. Manager's song touched his hair that he hadn't had time to fiddle with and said with an apologetic smile, "President Chun, I'm really sorry. Xiaolu doesn't know any better and offended you. Don't worry. If you have any requests, I'll arrange it for you immediately." The receptionist named Xiao Lu stood at the back with her head lowered in fear. She also knew that she had made a mistake. Xiao Lu was on the night shift this week. She didn't know, but Manager Song knew. This ordinary-looking old man in a thin undershirt was the dean of a university. If it was only the dean, it would be fine, because there were also many leaders of second-rate colleges and even technical schools who wore the skin of a dean. However, when Chun Zongdai arrived at Chongqing University, the vice-chancellor of Chongqing University personally welcomed him and escorted him to his room. Manager Song, who had witnessed all this, understood that Chun Zongdai's background was definitely not small. If he offended him, not to mention the culprit, Xiao Lu, he might not be able to keep his position as the manager on duty. Chun Zongdai sized up Manager Song and slowly said, "The problem isn't too big, but it's not too small either. However, as a manager, you have to strengthen the ideological education of your employees in the future. How can you judge a book by its cover?" Yes. You're right. Manager Song nodded and said. Now, no matter who was right or wrong, it was definitely not wrong for him to sincerely admit his mistake first. Chun Zongdai's anger subsided a lot. He nodded and said, "I have a few friends here, and their family happens to be staying in Chongqing for a few days. Take a look and help arrange an empty double room. Don't worry about the cost. We'll pay according to the price." "How can I let you pay for it?" Manager Song laughed and said, "It's during the meeting now, so the guest rooms are not open to the public. There are a lot of empty rooms. I'll get Xiao Lu to arrange it for you immediately. You can stay as long as you want. We'll pay for it." Poplar Fruit didn't want to be greedy for such a small advantage. He said seriously, "After all, they're not teachers here for the meeting. It's not good for them to stay in the guest house for free." When Poplar Fruit said it was not good for them, he was referring to Higashiyama University, which he and Chun Zongdai represented. On the other hand, he himself was quite resistant to such a thing. Chun Zongdai, on the other hand, gave him a look of appreciation. A scholar should have the spirit of not bending over for 5 buckets of rice. This, Manager Song looked at Chun Zongdai awkwardly. Chun Zongdai waved his hand and said, "It's arranged like this. It's okay. Hurry up. I have to meet with your president Ma later." Manager Song had no choice but to ask Xiao Lu at the front desk to find the room key for Xiong Jiwu and the others. He wanted to make up for it. While hesitating, he took the opportunity to say to Chun Zongdai, "President Chun, your friend's family of 6 only wants a double room. It's so crowded. Why don't I arrange another room for you? Anyway, the empty guest rooms are just empty rooms." "A family of 6? Chun Zongdai counted in confusion. Then he saw Poplar Fruit's appearance. He laughed and said, "No, this is my disciple. He and his daughter are included in the participants. By the way, ask Xiao Lu to help find which room Poplar Fruit is staying in at Higashiyama University. Give him a key." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "There was a misunderstanding just now. Do you need us to go up and get the participation card for you to register?" Manager Song was also an official in the guest house. Naturally, he had trained a pair of keen eyes. Poplar Fruit's clothes were not good enough, and his hair and skin were a little dirty. But when he spoke, his temperament was reflected. He was a living copy of Chun Zongdai. In literary terms, they came from the same origin. Manager Song did not dare to be negligent. He laughed and said, No, President Chun has already spoken. Do you think he would lie to me? Xiao Lu, did you hear that? Hurry up and help. Help Brother Yang find his room key." Poplar Fruit, Mui Yang, the fruit of apple. Poplar fruit said with a smile. In order to make up for the impression in Chun Zongdai's heart, Manager Song personally carried the 2 bags of luggage of the Xiong family and walked forward. Xiao Lu also lowered his head and carried the bag in fear and trepidation, following behind. Xiong Jiwu had never seen such treatment. He supported his wife on his back with one hand and wanted to snatch the bag with Manager Song with the other. No. Maybe Xiong Jiwu's accent was too heavy, but Manager Song actually judged that he was a meow. He immediately changed to meow and said with a smile, "Brother, it's okay. Leave it to us. Please forgive us for the neglect before." Manager Song was also a meow. The world was too small. Xiong Jiwu could not compete with him. He could only squeeze out a smile and said, Thank you. Poplar Fruit did not care about the little episode between them. He was now holding Kiki in his arms and quickly distancing himself from Chun Zongdai. Grandpa Beard. Kiki did not sleep well yesterday. She had just woken up for a long time before she regained her consciousness. When she recognized Chun Zongdai's appearance, Kiki became excited. She still remembered that Grandpa Beard was soft and comfortable to touch. It was even more comfortable to pull out. When Chun Zongdai saw Kiki, who was baring her fangs and brandishing her claws, his eyes widened. He was so scared that he jumped to the side to protect his beard. Kiki was like a big lion that had just woken up. It was too scary that you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.